Hello and welcome to today's episode. We will be talking about the year 2003 and what that brought for video games, along with selecting 3 games at random in our Relay of Gaming segment. And also we have some things to go over for modern gaming as well too. So hopefully you had an excellent week as we're going in here now. Well, let's see, over halfway through January now. So hopefully if you had any New Year's resolutions, you're staying on track on that. Or if you just say, you know what, I don't do New Year's resolutions, you're at least, on path to still hit your goals, whatever they might be for this year. And so let's get going here with selecting these 3 games that we will be discussing for Relay of Gaming. And I'm up to 1,706 games now on my list here. And so been just again adding games as I've just been coming across just random games in my library that I've had, or if I see something as throughout the week and all that, a game that I don't have on there, I'll add it on there. And so let's see what this week brings for Relay of Gaming. So starting off with the very first one here. All right, let's see. We got 260. All right, let's see what that brings here. Okay, so we got an excellent one here. So this is for Contra Shattered Soldier. I'm actually excited about that one. That's, well, we'll talk about it. All right, but let's see. Let's get into the next one here. And we got 577. Let's see what this is here. And so for this, we have Gradius 2. All right. Okay. So let's see what we got after Gradius 2. Let's see, 121. 121. So we got Beyond Good and Evil. Okay, so some good stuff here. All right, so let's talk about what I know about these games here. So Contra Shattered Soldier. This game came out at least in North America, it was in 2002, and it came out on the PlayStation 2. And so Contra Shattered Soldier, it's kind of a return to form for Konami on this series. And so Contra was just sort of like I guess you can almost say like the main godfather of running gun shooting games. And they kind of went a bit stale though, or, they didn't have a lot of good entries when we went into the 5th generation. There was I believe it was like Contra Legacy of War, and they were published by Konami, I think, but they were developed by, I believe, an American developer, Appaloosa, or something to that effect. And they just weren't very good. They were like top-down 3D shooters, but I never really played them much, but I just know that they didn't get the best reception. But this one here, it's 2D, but using polygonal graphics, so 2.5D. And I love the look of this game where it's very gritty and kind of metallic, industrial, and just kind of goes really well with the overall tone of the game and runs at a smooth 60 frames per second. In some spots, the graphics, at least back then they did, there's certain spots that it almost looks like a little bit photorealistic. So it makes for a pretty cool effect overall. But then, you're seeing the cool alien designs, and some of the stuff they look similar to some of the 16-bit Contra games. So for example, the first boss, that big old sort of like mutated alien turtle looking thing, it kind of makes a return, only with a bit of a twist in this one. But yeah, it just really fun running gun and shooter. And this one, what I really liked about it is that it's very much pattern based, where, I mean, once you get the pattern down and all, you can really hone down and perfect your skills on mastering this game. As one of the things to see more of this game is where the better you do in a level, and as far as like killing all the enemies and getting like the perfect score, eventually you can unlock like, I think, 1 or 2 more stages afterwards. So it definitely gives you an incentive, right? An incentive to try to do better, as you'll have like this percentage counter at the top middle of the screen, and kind of giving you gauging you where you're at on the stage as far as how many enemies you've killed and all, right, too. If you're close to getting to 100% and all. And so definitely give the game some replayability value in that. So that was pretty cool for that. And so with the 2-player co-op also, where you can control either Bill Reiser, I think is his last name, and Lucia, who she's, I believe this is her first time in a Contra game, and she's like an android. Because you don't control Lance in this one, and, well, that kind of plays into the bit of the story. Not that the story is anything really, worth paying much attention to, but it's, it's there. It's, I guess entertaining enough and all. But the real whole thing about this game, right, is, again, just an awesome gameplay, as it's just a blast to play, as like with previous Contra games. You're more limited on your move as far as like your amount of weapons, not moves. But the cool thing though about them is that they really are, like, you can tell that they really wanted you to use certain weapons in certain areas, as they really seem to give you an edge up, right, if you know what weapon to use at a specific time. And so you get just your regular rapid fire gun, and then you also get a flamethrower, which has a bit of a short range, but is really powerful and can burn through certain shields. And then you also get a sort of a bomb attack, and that's also really strong. But even though there's only 3 weapons, but you don't lose them, as you can always cycle through these weapons at will. And then they each do have an extra shot, where if you hold down the shot button and then let go, it'll unleash a certain attack, right? So for example, your machine gun, let's see, the machine gun, that one will, let's see if I could, the machine gun, if you hold it down, you'll get like this multi-directional shot. If it, on the flamethrower, if you hold down the shot button and let go, then it'll unleash like this really strong fireball. And then for the bombs, same thing, if you hold down the shot button, it'll unleash like some homing missiles. And so again, knowing when to use these weapon attacks will definitely help you succeed in the game. And yeah, just a lot of fun. And then the first, 1, 2, 3... the first 4 levels, you can select whichever one you want to start off in, and then after that it goes through, I think, like 1 or 2 levels afterwards, right, where where it just takes you there automatically. And then, like I said, if you get 100% in the stages, you unlock, I think it's an extra stage or 2 or so, I'm not sure. But yeah, really kick-ass action game that it seems like it just kind of went under the radar, though. I don't really hear too many people talking about this game anymore. And I mean, it was a really excellent game. And if I recall right, though, it was released around the time where there was like things like Kingdom Hearts, Metroid Prime, Grand Theft Auto, Vice City. So there was a lot of games that probably overshadowed it quite a bit. But it was definitely, for me anyways, a must-play on the PlayStation 2. Really excellent game, and I remember I was very excited to play this game, as it felt return to form for the company. And yeah, I just had a blast playing this. And the music too it's really awesome. It's very highly energetic, like rock and roll meets techno and industrial music. And when you're listening to it, if it sounds a little familiar, like the kind of music, it might be because if you're familiar with the Silent Hill games, the composer of that, I think his name was I think Akira something, I believe. I forget his last name, but he does the same music for Contra. And so just a kick-ass soundtrack. And you'll know that right off the bat from when you boot up the game and it has this little CGI cutscene at the beginning. The rock music that plays at the beginning, you just know that you're in for a good time, right? Because it's just very metal. It's really cool. And you're like, oh, hell yeah, this is going to be a fun time. So Contra Shattered Soldier is an amazing game. The only time I ever knew that it got re-released again was on the PlayStation 3, on the storefront on the PlayStation 3, where you can buy it digitally. Because outside of that, I don't think this game ever got re-released anywhere else, which is a shame. And I wish they would release it again, but not sure why they haven't. But yeah, because this game is it's amazing. It's a kick-ass 2D running gun shooter. And plays really well on emulation, if you have to go that route. But yeah, definitely worth checking out. But the next one I got here is for Gradius 2. And I got to say, for Gradius 2, I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not too familiar with the Gradius series. I've played one. I've gone a little ways into one. I never did end up beating it. 2 is one that I don't know a whole lot about. let's see, I know obviously it came out in the arcades. I don't know if actually if there was a home port. Maybe because I know there was like the Sharp, what is it? The Sharp X 68,000, I think Japanese computer. Maybe it came out on that, but I don't know if it did come out on the Nintendo. I have to do a bit of research on this one. But yeah, it's Gradius. It's there's 2D shoot 'em ups and side scrolling. And the unique thing about this series is the way you do your power ups, where I'm assuming it's the same in part two, because it's been the same because I played a bit of part three and then also part five. But basically in Gradius, I'm going to call it Gradius. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. But you get all these, as you shoot enemies, you'll see these power ups just floating through the air. And so if you have like this kind of like a menu at the bottom, and each one corresponds to a certain thing that you can power up. So, for example, the first box is speed. I forgot what the second boxes are, but let's just say it's like your shot, your missile, I think maybe your shield or something to that effect. Well, if you get one of the power ups, it'll power up. How does it go? Something like it, because you can get these power ups and then you can select like which thing you want to power up right then and there, something to that effect. And so a big part of the game here is to get yourself powered up, and ultimately where you're not getting powered down by dying, basically, because if you die, then you power down, and so then you go back to like your basic attacks, which can make it more difficult right as you start getting into the tougher areas on these games. At least something to that effect is what I understand of the first one, which I would assume is what the second one's all about. But yeah, other than that, I don't know how much about this. I know it came out I know Konami made it, and again, it was in the arcades. Not sure about a home port, so will be interesting to do a little bit of diving into this one and see what I can find out about this game. But then the third one is Beyond Good and Evil. And so this game here, it's another game that I haven't beaten. And, I was, when I got this game, it was back, I got it on I'm pretty sure I got it on the Xbox back in the day. And it was just a time where I was buying a whole bunch of games. And it was one that I got a little ways into it, but just never ended up beating it. Because, again, there were just so many games that were coming out that I was buying. And I was actually, beating quite a bit of them. But this one just didn't quite get to the end, but everything I played about this game, I really enjoyed. It's sort of the game that comes up. It's probably like the more popular, underrated game. A lot of times when I see lists of like underrated games or games that went under the radar or underappreciated games, Beyond Good and Evil always seems to come up on there. So I feel like it's got a bit of popularity because of that. But it was a game that came out in 2003, and it was a multiplayer game. So it came out on the three major consoles, so the Xbox, the GameCube, and the PS2, and maybe PC at that time. I'm not sure. I know it came out on the PC later, but you control Jade, and she's a photographer, and so you are an inhabitant of this. It's a fantasy kind of world. It's, it's seems like it's a combination of like kind of modernish, but kind of futuristic, but completely fictional. And you're a humanoid, but then there you get like other, the people around you, right? They're like kind of like humanoid animals, I guess, like some of the, because you're kind of like in this orphanage when you start off, and there's like a kid that looks like a goat, I believe, and things like that. But it's actually really artistic looking though, and has really cool character designs. If I recall, I believe the game was designed by Michael Ansel, who I believe is also the dude behind the Rayman games, I think. But whoever it is, a really imaginative world, and I really liked it for that. And the game back then ran really well, and it looked really nice. It ran at like 60 frames per second. And so what the game is, it's an action, I guess you could say like an action adventure game. And it has a lot of similarities to like the 3D Zelda games that were coming out around that time. And where, it's, you go into these dungeon-like areas, solve a lot of puzzles there, get some items to help you progress, and then you get like your overall hub world that you can explore and unlock a lot of secrets, and it's really fun. A big part of the hub world is you're riding around in this hovercraft, and it, the story overall, it has something to do like there's like some kind of an alien invasion that's taken over, but there's like a conspiracy, I believe, was this company, but because you're a photographer, you're sort of like an investigative journalist trying to uncover this mystery. Something to that effect. Like I said, I forgot a lot of the story, but I remember I really liked this game a lot and thought it was a very well polished and just a fun original game. And I'm glad that it got a little bit of love again because there was it was like maybe 2 years ago or so where they released a updated like I think it was like the 20th anniversary edition or something. So maybe it was like 2003. Maybe is that when it came out? I don't recall. God, I'm losing track of time. But the new version, it cleans up the graphics some. It certain things might not look as good. I'm not sure. I haven't really played around with that one too much, but either way, the game is excellent. Beyond Good and Evil, it's just a really clever original game, and I would say that if you like, okay, well, like the sort of fun sort of style of like Rayman, and then also with like the Zelda games, like things think like Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker, that kind of style of Zelda games. I think you could really enjoy this game. It's the acting is decent enough in it. It has a fun sense of humor to it. I mean, it's not overly silly, but it can be a funny game too, also. And so I think you'll have a lot of enjoyment with this game, and definitely an underappreciated game. But I don't know if the sequel will ever come out. I know they've talked about that for a while, but who knows with that now at this point. But either way, whether if it does or doesn't, this one is definitely worth checking out. And like I said, right there's the updated version that you can buy now on pretty much all the modern platforms, as far as I know. So yeah, Beyond Good and Evil. If for some reason you haven't checked it out, it's worth a look. If you're into like, if you just want to get into like a really cool action adventure game. But let's now start getting into some modern gaming information and news. So there was a few things that happened this week, like pretty much every week in gaming. And so again, as always, so just to kind of reiterate, if anyone's chiming in new here, I like to have a little moment here to talk things more related to modern gaming. I'll try to keep up as much as I can with like the news, but this is not a modern gaming news segment. I just don't have the time to try to keep up with a lot of that information. So it's more of a casual conversation. Think of it that way, that, you saw some things about video games and, talking about that kind of stuff. And so I try to cover like a wide variety of topics, like anything like the, up to the day modern gaming stuff as much as I can keep track of it, but also just like odd little oddities here and there, right? That I've heard about, things that might have to do with on the emulation scene, for example, games themselves, maybe more modern games that I'm playing at the moment. And which, when I say modern, I can be going back like 5 or 6 years back, though. And, but also like real life stuff too, that has to do with video games, though, to some extent. So that's sort of what this segment is here. But I had a few things here that I was able to jot down. So I wanted to go over some of this here. And so one thing that I saw that was pretty cool. So if you're into modding and you have a PC and all, I thought this was pretty cool. I didn't know. Apparently, this might have been out already for a while, but I came across this video that this guy was showing it off. But it's so the game Dragon Quest VIII, the run that came out originally on the PlayStation 2. So apparently, there's been a lot of people that have been working on mods on this game, and there's a way that you can pretty much make your own remastered version of this game, and it really looks excellent from what I saw. So Dragon Quest VIII is a game that there's two versions of it out. There's the one on the PlayStation 2 and then the one on the 3DS. The game itself is amazing. I absolutely love that game. But there's little things here and there that I like more about the PlayStation 2 version, but then there's some things that I like more about the 3DS version. So for example, on the PlayStation 2 version, you're going to get the better graphics, you're going to get the very symphonic soundtrack, and but on the 3DS version, though, you get more quality of life features, like for example an option to speed up the battles more, and also that the you can see your enemies instead of it just being random battles. So I was always thinking, I was like, well, what if there's a way that I can combine all of that, right, and make it into a nice remastered version? And there has been some ways to tinker with that. So for example, the 3DS version, I know that you can, if you have a powerful enough system, you can outfit it with some higher res textures and all. But it looks like, from what I can tell, the PlayStation 2 version, there's this way you can mod it with like 4K textures on it and give it some quality of life improvements, like, for example, speeding up the battles. Because, I mean, Dragon Quest VIII, it's an amazing game, and I do appreciate the grind on it, but it can be a bit grindy, though. And because this game is kind of long. and a lot of it has to do with just the grinding. So if there was a way to speed that up, that'd be excellent. And it seems like you can in this version, or at least there's something to do that. And there's other things you can tinker around with. I didn't get the whole scoop on everything that it adds to it, but it looks like there's an option to have it run at 60 frames per second. Although the guy that I saw the video that was covering this, he did mention something that because it's putting it at 60 frames per second on a game that doesn't normally run at that, it can cause certain little glitches here and there in the game. Like I think he gave an example that if there's a boss that you have to walk up on, I can't think of who that might have been, but apparently because it's running at 60 frames per second, it's not triggering it like you're walking. It looks like you're running. So to get past that part, you have to like put it back down to 30 frames, and odd little things like that. And that's just the one thing about when you're playing games with mods. Well, what a lot of these modders are doing, it's absolutely amazing. I've been playing some games this way, and it's just really cool experience, and I'm so glad that there's people out there doing this kind of stuff. But there's going to be a few little things here and there that kind of break a little bit of the original experience, so just something to keep in mind. But other than that, I mean, it looks absolutely stunning, and so something that I do want to try to get into. I just need to try to look it up to see if there's, because you can do it on the PC, obviously, but I want to see if there's a way to do it on the Steam Deck, because that'd be the more convenient way for me to try to do that and play that game. Because the Steam Deck uses like the Linux operating system, and so sometimes there's differences between that and the PC when it comes to emulation. But I'll need to do a little bit more digging in that. But if you have any interest, again, right, in like modding and Dragon Quest 8, check it out. I think the guy's channel that I watched him cover this on, his name is Blitz, I believe, and so he does a lot of cool stuff when it comes to JRPGs. And came across this video that he was covering it well, he was covering the work of the original people that did the mods. So check it out. I would say check out his channel, and I want to say that he probably has links to the original creators on how to get this all set up. But yeah, but really cool stuff though. But getting into more modern gaming news, so there's a rumor out there, and from what I've saw on some videos, seems to be coming from a really credible source. So that's why I think it was getting some traction with a lot of like the bigger news outlets for video games. But it seems like The Witcher 3, so that really excellent action RPG game that came out over 10 years now, is getting some kind of an expansion DLC of some sort sometime this year. So interesting. Yeah, that's definitely a way to give it new life, but it kind of makes sense though, because I mean, The Witcher show on Netflix, well, that seems to be kind of dying out. Did anybody like that? I watched the first season and I liked it. I thought Henry Cavill I thought he did really good in it. The overall show though, I mean, it was cool. Like I think it was the first episode where they had that really cool fight scene with where I think it's the fight scene, right? Where he earns the name of Butcher of, oh my God, the Butcher of what? The Butcher of whatever. I forgot the nickname that he has. But anyway, that sword fight scene that earns him that name at the start of the show, or at least the first episode, I believe. I thought that was really cool. And the overall show was okay, but it didn't really quite hook me that well. And then after that, I just never kept track of it. But I think it still has some fans, I guess. And then also with The Witcher 4 probably being some years off, seems to make sense that they want to try to keep the name The Witcher and video games anyways alive. So yeah, it would be interesting. I don't know if this has ever been done before, where if it's like a full blown expansion of DLC of some sort that it came out like over a decade afterwards from the original release. I can't think of any other scenario that might have happened, but that'd be cool. I'd be for it. I beat The Witcher 3 some time ago, and it took me a while to beat that game though, because it was a game that I was just slowly playing because I would just love getting lost in that world. And eventually, after like a few years, so the game came out in 2015, I think it was around 2018 or 19 when I finally just pushed through to beat the game. But really enjoyed it and had a fantastical time with it. But I never did get into the DLC, which I heard is excellent. I think it's called Blood and Wine, and what was the other one called? Heart of Stone? I'm not sure. But so I really want to get into those DLCs. But and then I haven't really played it with the new next gen upgrades and all. So might be a time to get back into that world. And I'm not complaining. That game is amazing. It's in my top 10 favorite games of all time. It's just absolutely amazing. So this is pretty cool if it does get some kind of an expansion for it. though. That's something I'll keep my eye on. But another thing that was leaked out, and so I don't like talking too much about. If I talk about leaks, I'm really just talking about it just in a sense of like for entertainment purposes. Not It's not something that I'm like holding my breath for or going to get myself super hyped up. It's just for the sake of conversation, basically. And if I do talk about a leak of some sort that came out, I'm talking about it because it seems to be coming out from a lot of the more credible, sites and channels out there. And but again, even they're saying, right, no, this is just a rumor, it's a leak. So again, don't take this for something that is definitively happening, but just kind of fun to talk about and at least think about a bit. But again, right, don't anything I say like this and all that, it's not something I get super hyped about. It's just the possibility exists. And that is for Metroid 6, a 2D version that might be coming out sometime-ish soonish. And soonish, I would probably think within the next 2 years. So, but God, I forgot how some of the information came out about this. But again, it seems like somebody that has some credibility to them, that is a leaker, put out this information that this is something that another game basically from Mercury Steam. And because if you think about it, Metroid Dread came out in 2021, so we're going on 5 years now. And so if they do want to do it, and it was a decent seller for them, right? It sold like what 3 million or so. And I mean, I don't know how Metroid Prime 4 is gonna do. With everything going on around that game, we'll see. I guess if that sells any well. But it seems like because Metroid Dread was a well received game, it sold. It was the best selling Metroid game so far, I believe. And so it seems like they would want to will continue capitalizing on that if they're going to continue on with the Metroid franchise, which I would think, excuse me, I would think Nintendo would, even with some of the bad rep that they got with Metroid Prime 4. I don't think Nintendo wants to abandon this IP completely. And so the next logical step would seem to be a 2D Metroid game. So I think that's kind of what this leak is based around, but also possibly that they heard something from someone, right, that is in the know of the development of this potential Metroid 6 2D game, which is cool. I mean, if I certainly wouldn't mind it, right, if it's done really well. I really enjoyed Metroid Dread. My only hope for it though would be that if they do a 2D Metroid, I really enjoyed Metroid Dread, and I think it's a really well structured game. The Metroidvania aspect of it, which I really enjoy, with the interconnecting levels, how everything sort of comes together, and how your power ups seem to be meaningful as far as you're progressing in the game. It does it pretty well. It is a bit linear though, and because that's one of the issues that I have with Metroid Prime 4, but not quite to the point that it felt like you didn't get that sensation of exploration. But if they do a Metroid 6 in the 2D style, I hope they open it up a little bit more to give you the freedom to explore on your own. Basically, I guess what I'm getting at is to back to the level design of like something like Metroid Zero Mission or Super Metroid, which I think those two games are fantastic when it comes to the Metroidvania aspect of them, on how it lets you explore and gives you that sense, right, that you're on an adventure, but it's not quite holding your hand throughout the whole way. But either way, though, I'm if that ends up being true, I think that's pretty exciting, and definitely looking forward to that. Let's see. But another thing that was also, again, this is just something that seems to been suggested, more like is what it seems, but it's that Silent Hill is to be a yearly release. So like basically that there's some kind of a Silent Hill game roughly about every year. And so again, I think this is coming from like conversations that some of the developers or somebody from Konami had. And I mean, Silent for the longest time, right? We wanted Silent Hill games to go back to, the original style. But then we went through a big period where there was no Silent Hill stuff, and then even then, when we had some Silent Hill games, they weren't the best received. Like there was, what was it, Silent Hill Homecoming, and then Downpour, I think, was another one that came out during the seventh generation stretch. I played one of them. I think it was Homecoming that I played a bit of it, and I mean, I didn't get too much into it to really get a good idea of if it was decent or not. But they ultimately weren't the best received. And then we get Silent Hill 2, and then Silent Hill F fairly recently. And overall, Silent Hill 2 seems to have been really well received. There's going to be some people, obviously, right, that didn't like it because Silent Hill 2 was just a landmark title. And it's one of those titles that if you mess with it, you're going to turn away some people. I thought Silent Hill 2 was pretty well made. For me, it doesn't replace the original. But I'm sort of the kind of gamer that, I grew up gaming from a long time ago, and so a lot of those games that I played back in the day still hold a special place for me. And so whenever there is like a new version of it that comes out, I don't immediately say like, okay, this version is obsolete. There might be a handful of cases that I can think that of, but Silent Hill 2 is not one of them, right? The original PlayStation 2 version for me still holds up incredibly well, and also because it is a much different game, right? Where in the original one, it's more of the fixed camera angles. Well, not always, but when you're like out in the Silent Hill area. But for the most part, it's kind of more of the perspective of like the Resident Evil games, and then also with its tank controls, that gives it a certain feel to it that third person over the shoulder perspective doesn't quite replicate as well. You can, again, you can debate whether one or the other is better or not. But for me personally, it's just two different flavors of the game, and so I'm happy both exist, right? Because I did really enjoy the remake. I thought it was excellent. And and then Silent Hill F, a little bit that I played of that, I was like, okay, this is interesting, right? And so it has my interest. And so the both of them sold, fairly well, right? So it seems like they want to capitalize on that. But it's like walking that thin line between, okay, so now you're giving us what we wanted, but now you're going to be giving us too much of it, right? Because we've seen a lot of examples where eventually series just become stale or uninspired when that happens. So I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head here, but like eventually like Assassin's Creed or like Call of Duty, where there's just too much of it now, and it's almost like they need to take a break. So will Silent Hill become that, where it was once like kind of more of a niche thing, and now all of a sudden it's being really popularized and mainstream? I mean, we'll see. I think a lot of it comes down to how they're planning that out, and if they, I mean, I don't know if they're outsourcing the game to like a lot of different developers, because like Silent Hill 2 was the remake was made by Blooper. Oh my God, Blooper team. Oh, gee, I can't think of the developer's name, but they were done by that team, and then Silent Hill F. I don't know for sure who developed that, but I want to say I think it was a Konami studio, like in Japan, maybe. I'm not sure, but I guess if they have different developers lined up and they have like a plan in place, okay, like okay, this developer will do this Silent Hill game, and then this developer will do this Silent Hill game. So kind of along the lines of like what Call of Duty was doing, right, where they would have Infinity Ward, and then who was the other one? Treyarch, I think. And then there was Sledgehammer. After a while, I kind of lost track of like who's developing it. But like because back in the day, right? So there was Infinity Ward doing the Modern Warfare games, and then Treyarch was doing the Black Ops games, and so they were alternate every year or so, right, give or take. And so if they have something like that in place, I mean, it'd be interesting. But how much can you do with the Silent Hill series? Well, I guess you can do a lot, but I guess how much can you do with it to the point where it's not going to start getting completely stale, right? Because one thing that, like for example, using that example, the Call of Duty games, what they have is that they have their multiplayer component, right? Where a lot of people do want new maps, new levels, to continue playing in the multiplayer, and that'll be fresh enough for them, to continue on with, every year. But does that work with Silent Hill? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's intriguing, but it just comes down to how they implement it all. So we'll see. But I mean, I really enjoyed the Silent Hill 2. And so the blooper team, is that what they're called? That sounds weird, but oh my God, it's early in the morning while I'm recording this. So, but either way, I think they're also the ones doing the original Silent Hill remake. So I'm really excited about that one. And so if you do the Silent Hill remake, what I would be happy with if they do Silent Hill remake, and then they do Silent Hill 3 remake also, within the style of like Silent Hill 2 remake. And I say 1 and 3 because if you don't know much about the series, Silent Hill 2 was sort of its own thing, which is why they probably did that one first, and also because it's such a fan favorite. 1 and 3 are actually sequels to one another. So there's part 1, and then as far as like the story goes and all, you can say like there's Silent Hill, and then Silent Hill 3 would kind of be like the Silent Hill 2 if you're going off of like how they're connected together, if that makes sense. So if they do part 1, you got to do part 3 too also. And so I'd be really happy with that. Anything past that, well, I guess we'll see, right? It's just one of those things. We'll see how they implement that all. But another thing too that I saw is, and this is pretty cool, because so this has to do with so Sony made the announcement on this, but it seems like this is something that they're partnering to some extent with Microsoft and Nintendo. And it seems like they're starting to make some sort of effort to get rid of a lot of like shovelware on their digital storefronts. With the PlayStation and the so on the Sony PlayStation Store and on the Microsoft Store, I don't notice it too much. And I gotta say, on the Microsoft storefront, I don't notice it a whole lot. Usually, the main games that I would think, that are the more popular ones, or even like the more hidden gem ones, they seem to be what's kind of more at the forefront of when you're exploring the store, at least from my experience. The PlayStation seems to have some shovelware on there and all, but at least from what I've seen, I mean, I'm gonna, yeah, I might have to scroll a little bit and all, but I'm gonna, for the most part, whether if I'm looking at sales or kind of exploring what's out there, I generally tend to find what I'm looking for, more or less. The Nintendo eShop though is horrible. And what's crazy is, and so when I so it's not only the shovelware, but it's also the very not safe for work content that's on there too. And Nintendo surprises me on this because even on their eShop on the Switch, I mean, it seems to be a little bit improved on the Switch too. At least it did at first, but last time I was scrolling through there, I was like, okay, well, here's a bunch of hentai stuff, and it surprises me because supposedly Nintendo's a more family friendly, oriented stuff. But there I am scrolling through sometimes through the eShop. I'm like, oh shit, there's like a whole bunch of like hentai stuff. And sometimes when I'm scrolling through the eShop, I got my kids with me, and so it just doesn't seem like it filters out that content out that much, and that it's just kind of right there, right? Like and some of like when you're scrolling through like the new releases, so Nintendo surprises me on that, and Nintendo seems to be the one that's the worst as far as I can tell. But what Sony did though was that there was some developer from Germany, I believe, and I forgot the developer's name. But I mean, I hadn't noticed this, but apparently they had like over 1,000 games or so. I think I read that it was just a bunch of like this shovelware games that they had on there, like something about like a jumping hamburger or a jumping hot dog, or I don't know, something to that effect. And where the purpose of these games, I mean, they very much look like a cheap mobile game, and where you're just pressing a button to make this food item jump. But it seems like the reason they would put that on there is because it's a quick way to get like a platinum trophy. You just make the food item jump like so many times, which takes like I don't know, 5 minutes or so, and bam, you got a platinum trophy. So for people that are very trophy hunters, right, it's like a quick way to get a trophy. And so they sell these games for cheap, and it seems to be that's kind of the purpose of them. And so Sony went in there though and just completely removed all the games from this developer that they had on their storefront, which is like again something about like over 1,000 games. And so I mean I mean if you're a developer and you're putting, I mean, but at the same time that's kind of their fault too that they allowed this stuff in the first place. And so it just I mean, if you're going to have just open season on whatever goes on there is fine enough, then you're going to there is a just a lot of like lack of quality content that's going to get on there. And so I mean, I guess it's good that they're taking some sort of action against this, but you know, it just seems like it took him a while though, and because I mean, like I said, especially the eShop on the Nintendo is just flooded with a bunch of stuff. And I mean, if you want to make whatever content, I mean, that's should be fine. If you want to make your more adult oriented content, I mean, that's fine. There's markets for that, but it just seems like there should be more of a kind of a some kind of control over that stuff, because I mean, people are going to make what they're going to make, and again, if there's a market for it, then I mean, if someone wants to get their jollies off of like looking at hentai, cool, right? But but there should be a way to like filter that stuff out where it's not just flooding like the main page of the like for example the eShop where it's having a hard time trying to find like the main games, and especially like where I'm not, again, make whatever you want, but because Nintendo tends to be more family friendly and all, it just trips me out when I see that stuff on there. But hopefully this will be at least some level of control over that kind of stuff, and where it's just mainly not clogging up the stores, and when that makes it harder to find some of the more sought after games, or ways to find like more hidden gems, right, that are actually quality video games instead of just something being made for like for to get a quick trophy or some more adult oriented content stuff. But um I don't even want to think like how you could get a trophy on some of those hentai things. But yeah, just hopefully this will be some kind of a push forward, right, where they can start cleaning up some of this stuff on there. Let's see. But another thing too, also that came out. So actually, so two cool things, and this has to do for shows or upcoming shows that are based on video games that got some interesting casting choices announced. So starting with Lara Croft, so there's some kind of a Tomb Raider series, like a live action series coming out on Amazon Prime. And so Sophie Turner is to play Lara Croft. Sophie Turner, I believe she is the actress that played Jean Grey in the newer X-Men movies, like the younger version. So it was Famke Jensen, I believe is her name, the one that originally played Jean Grey in the older X-Men movies, and then in the newer one, I'm pretty sure it was Sophie Turner. And then I want to say I think she had a role in Game of Thrones, but I haven't seen Game of Thrones all the way. But I think that's the actress's name. But yeah, it looks like she got announced as Laura Croft, and so they showed a picture of her where she's in her outfit and all. And yeah, I mean, she very much looks like Laura Croft. It kind of gives me the vibes of like the very first Laura Croft game when she has her sunglasses. So it looks like they were going for that look. So I mean, it seems like they pulled it off, but we'll see. Again, a lot of it comes down to the writing, the overall tone of the show, and things of that nature. But at the very least, she looks like Laura Croft. So I guess something to look forward to. But the one that actually was seemed to be turning a lot of heads was this announcement for that we finally got our Kratos in another show that's coming out, I believe, also on Amazon Prime. So apparently, Amazon Prime is doing their thing with video game related shows, I guess. But yeah, so they've announced this God of War show that they're doing, and so Ryan Hurst got cast as Kratos, and people seem to be pretty excited about that. So I was like, "Who's Ryan Hurst?" And so I started looking it up, and so he was an actor that, excuse me, looks like he was one of his main roles that he's been popular for was in Sons of Anarchy, which is another show that I haven't watched. I saw like a few episodes of it, and I really liked it. And I know I've had some people. My brother, I remember, he used to tell me that I gotta watch that show, and it seems cool, right? I mean, it seems something that I would like, and apparently he has a pretty big role in that. But I was like, okay, cool. And I'm looking at the dude, and I was like, yeah, I can definitely see him as Kratos. You shave his head and all, and he's already got the beard going. So okay, yeah. And but then I also found out that he does the voice for Thor in God of War Ragnarok. So he's already been involved in the God of War world, and I really liked his voice as Thor. I was like, okay, this I can see this working. So yeah, I mean, seems pretty cool. So that's something to look forward to. Both of these shows, it looks like they're not going to come out anytime too soon. I would think probably next year in 2027. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. To get some pretty well, again, what they showed of Sophie Turner as Lara Croft. I mean, she looks the part. Ryan Hurst, he just got announced, right? So they haven't had like him in a outfit or a costume or anything like that. But I mean, at the very least, he definitely sounds like he's somebody that could pull off that role. So that's all pretty cool there. So hopefully these shows end up coming out pretty decent. Let's see, but something also that I saw, and this is crazy. It's so I'm not familiar with the Monster Hunter games, but I thought this was interesting, and it's just one of those things about, again, with modern gaming, that it's just kind of annoyance, a nuisance, and but it's just the reality of, I guess, game development and all, whether this was done intentional or not. But there was a story that I saw that came out that says, so Monster Hunter Wilds. So I have heard that this game has had some frame rate issues, I believe specifically on the PC. And that, again, just some of these games come out broken. They have like these frame rate issues that just seems to kind of baffle people as to why they would have these frame rate issues. Where apparently somebody, I think like a modder, found out the reason why. And it seems to be that the reason why there's these frame rate issues is that, or one thing that was triggering to actually to improve the frame rate issues, I should say, is that the more DLC you buy or have, that it improves the frame rates. So that sounds highly suspicious. So it's like, so you're going to improve my frame rate because I buy more DLC? Again, whether if that's intentional or not from Capcom's part, who knows? But it's either seems very scummy business practices, or just a complete oversight as far as with game development. And I say that not being a game developer, I don't know, I can only imagine this job is very difficult and all. It just seems a little odd, right, that this kind of stuff is out there, or that this is what improves the frame rates on it. And so there's just a lot of things with a lot of like quirks and annoyances with video games nowadays. It seems to be tied to some kind of a controversy or something that is related to money. And that is why, I mean, there's just a lot of like negativity around modern gaming nowadays, because if this is true, right, again, whether if it was done on purpose or whether it was just a complete oversight, I mean, it definitely makes people lose faith in the gaming industry, just because it sounds just all very shady, very predatory, and how it, not very consumer friendly and all. And so just, one of those things there. And so I guess it'll just come down to see what Capcom's response to this is. I'd be curious to see, because it's suspected that Digital Foundry would do a video of this to see, I guess, to what extent this is all about. And but yeah, just I thought it was interesting. Again, I don't play on PC much, and then also I don't play Monster Hunter series. I just thought it was interesting, just because again, this kind of stuff though seems to surround a lot of video games in general, right? Where you're thinking, well, then is that maybe what happened with that other game, right? That was having some frame rate issues or something along the lines of that. And so just kind of makes you suspicious of a lot of games coming out nowadays. And again, I've talked about it before and all, with my interest in the hobby is starting to wane some with keeping up with the latest and greatest, mainly because of practices like this, right? But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting there. But another news here that also was, this is another leak here, but this is for hardware. And excuse me, but it seems like there's a potential that there's some kind of a new Switch 2 hardware coming out somewhat soonish. And so the speculation on this, so of what it would be, I mean, people are thinking, well, it seems like, OLED, like having an OLED screen seems the next natural choice. But a lot of people are actually thinking that it might be like some kind of a Switch 2 Lite. So kind of like what we got on the Switch. And so some of the things that I was seeing on this, it seems to make sense, just because, right now the Nintendo Switch 2, I mean, it's not the most expensive system out there, but it is a bit pricey from what people have always known Nintendo to be, on the more cheaper end, at least in the more recent times. So having like a Switch 2 Lite seems to be at least, appealing if you're trying to get something for your kid. But what is it? Well, I mean, it's speculated that the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to go up in price, but right now it's what, 450. And so if you can bring the price down to, I don't know, something like 350, and you get a Switch 2 Lite, and it's, even though it's only handheld, but it's a smaller form factor and all, I mean, that seems to be something that could sell well. So that seems to be make sense as well too, which would be pretty cool, because that's actually what got me into the Switch. Was I wasn't too interested in Nintendo Switch at first. I've just been kind of annoyed by, I was already kind of annoyed with Nintendo during most of the 2010s or so, because of the Wii and then the Wii U. And so then that kind of carried over to the Switch. But then eventually, as I started seeing that it was a popular system, and I was like, I'm going to make the jump to it. And I got the Switch Lite at first. That was my first Switch console. So it would seem to make sense, right? But just a rumor, but seems to be coming again from a lot of credible sources. So, and it seems to make sense, right? Business wise, that seems to make sense. So that'd be cool, if it does end up happening, because it seems like the Switch 2 is kind of, or I mean, I'm sorry, the Nintendo and the Switch 2, it seems to be sort of not doing too well when it comes to its finances. I am not going to pretend to know a lot about the stock market or anything like that, but there was a lot of news stories that I was seeing how Nintendo's stock has dropped dramatically, and it seems to be really after like the whole Black Friday thing, right? Where it sold okay, but it didn't sell that well, and from what I was seeing, it looks like it dropped about 33%. Again, I don't quite understand the stock market that much and all, but it just seems like, there's a lot of investors and stockholders and all that, right, that aren't maybe having too much faith in the system. And so it's a bit of a red flag right now for Nintendo on how, their finances are doing, how this new system is doing, and, going forward in the future, where I think reality is starting to set in. And whether they made the right choice with what the Switch to how they went about the Switch 2 and all, I don't know. For me, I mean, there's definitely some things about the system that I am not too fond of. Like, I tend to buy my games digitally just because, again, I just don't have the space to have like a bunch of physical media around. But understanding right and all what buying digital games can mean for the future, I'm aware of that. But I'm also I'm not a big fan that they went with this key card thing. That's one knock against it. The price tag got 450. I mean, that is getting a bit, a little bit on the pricey side, but I still felt it was fairly priced, right? All things considered, with the reality of just the state of the world. But the game prices are pretty expensive, and that Nintendo jumped the gun with, what, $80, I believe, on the Mario Kart. I mean, that's, wow. All right, that's a lot. That's a lot. And so, and then also that, I mean, I like Donkey Kong Bonanza, Mario Kart World for what it is. It's still a pretty fun game. Metroid Prime 4, a bit of a disappointment. But but not too bad overall, right? I wouldn't say that the Switch 2 lineup of games right now is horrible, but I think like they really need like a big Mario game or a big Zelda game, at least announced, for people to try to get back on board on it, because those are the main um, games from Nintendo that are really going to turn some heads. And so hopefully something will get announced somewhat soon. There's a bunch of rumors coming out as far as the next Zelda game. We got the 40th anniversary coming up here soon, I believe in February. So we'll see. We'll see what they announce and all. But again, I don't know a whole lot about it as far as the stock market grows and all. But I just know that there's some red alerts coming out from Nintendo as far as their performance with what the expectation was on the system here, and then with the rumors that the system's probably going to increase in price here soon. That doesn't bode too well for them. But I don't think that it's something that they're going to go under or anything like that. It just sounds like the system sold really well at first. I mean, it was breaking records, right? I think like the fastest selling game console or something like that. But it seems like the numbers have been falling a lot, or it hasn't been selling all of a sudden. So was it just like the main people that were going to get the Nintendo were going to get it just because they're such big fans? But then after that, for its long appeal, is it starting to lose some of that steam? We'll see. But yeah, either way though, it sounds like it's not the best of news for Nintendo. Something I'll try to keep an eye on as far as how the story develops. But yeah, I thought that was interesting though. Yeah, and I mean, hopefully they'll recover. I mean, at the same time, it's with a lot of, Nintendo's done a lot of scummy things for sure, but they do still make some really excellent games, and they're one of the only, I mean, game developers out there, that have a console out there that really seem to just be trying to make video games, right, and not what like a lot of the other companies are doing, like Sony and Microsoft. They seem to, I don't know. Their strategies for for this generation have seemed, I don't know. They just seem odd, right? They're all over the place. So at the very least, Nintendo seems to still want to just make games, and so for that reason, hopefully they'll still be able to, I guess, get it together here. But we'll see how this story develops. But the last thing I wanted to touch on here, and this is actually something that again, another thing was modern gaming stuff and all, but it's still exciting though in a way. I guess if anything, just helps me justify my purchase that I made with the PlayStation 5 Pro. And I got the PlayStation 5 Pro because I've mentioned before that within my budget, within my reason, and if I'm able to, I do like to try to get the best possible picture, and also because I don't know how much I'm going to be continuing on with, like, whenever the inevitable PlayStation 6 and whatever the hell Xbox doing come out. I don't know if I'm going to continue following up with all that. So I was like, okay, if this is going to be my last generation that I'm really, getting the up to the date consoles on, I wanted to try to get it in the best possible way, that I can play my games on. And so the PlayStation 5 Pro seemed to fit the bill. And I was able to get a pretty nice TV. And so I figured, well, might as well try to take advantage of that. And I was in a position to do it. So I shelled out the money for the PlayStation 5 Pro. And I mean, I like it. Again, there has been some games where I have seen some improvement on, but there's also been a lot of stuff though too where it's been pretty disappointing. So two games that I was really looking forward to that it didn't ruin the experience completely, but it is a bit like, why is it not as good as it should be, like it is on the base PS5. So two examples of that is Silent Hill 2. That there was a stretch in the game there towards the end that I was like, okay, this doesn't look very good, and if anything, it's kind of annoying. And the fact that it's running on this more beefier system, and look, it seems to run worse than on the PlayStation 5. Well, then it seems like a big scam, right? And then also Metal Gear Solid Delta, which ran worse than the PlayStation 5, the base PS5 version did, to an extent. And so that's been annoying. It has. And so, again, I can still play my PlayStation 5 games, and they still look, for the most part, most of them look really good and all. And so, it's just one of those things like, well, it is what it is. But it's there. There was an announcement made though that it's not official from Sony, but it seems to be, again, from pretty credible sources, that there is going to be an update for PSSR that is going to be coming out between January and March is the time frame that they gave. So again, I'm not the most techie person, so I understand some of it. So I'll just try to give a bit of an overview of what it is, and then I'm sure there's a lot of other places that can go into detail more on this. But so PSSR, so in more modern gaming stuff or hardware, so like it started mainly on PC, I believe, where there's like DLSS and FSR, I believe. I could be getting some of my acronyms wrong there, but what they are is made like this some kind of like artificial upscaling where it can take a game and through some kind of an artificial intelligence upscale the games to look crisper without having to natively increase the actual resolution. So, for example, you got your 720p, 1080p, 1440p, and then 2160p, which I believe that's 4K. And so if you're aiming to output at a higher resolution natively, it's going to take more computing power, basically, right? Again, I don't know the GPU, CPU is working more on that. I don't know all that stuff. I just know that it's more taxing on the system, basically. So the cost of that is that if we increase the frame rate, or I'm sorry, if we increase the resolution, we're gonna lower the frame rate, which is why and then vice versa, right? If we increase the frame rate, we lower the resolution, which is why, like on a lot of newer systems, or I mean, especially on PC, right? You get a lot of options to tinker with that stuff. But on the more modern systems, we've been doing that now for a while since the Pro systems came out last generation, where you can choose, do you want better resolution or better frame rate, right? So you have to kind of choose between the two, and it's been a bit of a nuisance because, again, right? It's you kind of want the best of both worlds, right? Like I want a good frame rate, but I also want, good resolution too. Well, the point of the PlayStation was that it had this technology, PSSR, which is Sony's proprietary software or whatever that they're using to upscale their games, kind of like the way DLSS and I believe FSR is, right. If I'm getting my acronyms wrong, again, just feel free to laugh at me. But um, but so Sony decided to use their own version of it, but it's been kind of broken. Like the games that I can think of off the top. So again, I already mentioned Metal Gear Solid and Silent Hill, but then also there was, I believe, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora that was kind of broken too. Also on that, where they had to like patch the game to go back to the base PS5 version. I believe Alan Wake 2. I think they kind of fixed that game, but again, I want to say that I think I read that came a little broken too. one of the Jedi games, I believe, also. Um, and so, anyways, it's kind of like, well, we you pay more for the system, and then some of these, when they're trying to utilize this new, version of why you bought the system for is broken. Because again, if you can artificially increase the resolution, then it takes less computing power doing it that way, and it's supposed to still look really clear, but leaves more room to keep a high frame rate. So that's the point, right? That you're getting the high resolution, high frame rate still, right? And instead of having to choose, which is the point of the PS5 Pro. But they just haven't been able to implement that, well in some games, right, that have come out more recently. Some games do look really nice on the PS5 Pro. So, for example, like Horizon Forbidden West looks stunning. Um, Final Fantasy 16, it doesn't utilize like PSSR or upscaled anything and all, but because of the extra horsepower in the system, it seems to run at a more smoother 60 frames per second on the performance mode now, which is cool. Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. Honestly, again, this is how much of a Final Fantasy geek I am. I really love Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth, but seeing it in the more softer resolution that it came out with originally on the base PS5, it was a bit annoying, right? And I mean, I can play games with like lower resolution and all. It's just that it is a bit harder though when it's a newer game though, because they're built for that, right? To be more shinier and crisper with the graphics because of the nature of the graphics that the game comes with. And so when I was playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and with that really kind of sort of soft or kind of like a soft look to it, almost like somebody smudged Vaseline on the screen, it kind of threw me off a bit, right? And it was annoying. And so then I would go back to the resolution mode, but then I'm like, oh geez, now it's like feels like the game is just really chugging along right at 30 frames per second. And so in all honesty, now that I forgot to mention this earlier, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was the game that I bought the PS5 Pro for mainly, because when they were coming out, that version looked really good on that system there. That's what sold me on it. So then when I played the game on the PS5 Pro again, and yeah, I mean it looked completely stunning. I'm like, okay, this is awesome. I'm happy with this. Awesome. That was a good implementation of it. But then, like I said, when I was playing Silent Hill 2, like, what is this? Like towards the end of the game, it looked really glitchy, and I'll just say that it's on the floor. They use a certain texture, and it just had like this weird shimmering effect that kind of threw you off on the whole experience there. And then also with Metal Gear Solid Delta, it only gives you one option, but then the frame rate is not as good as like the base version PS5 version on the performance mode. So again, right? Just you would just think that if you have this beefier system, that you shouldn't worry about this kind of stuff. But anyways, all that to say that this PSSR 2.0 update that is supposedly coming out here soon will hopefully address a lot of those issues there. So annoying that we had to get here, but cool that it's at least happening. And so we'll see how this works out. And if it does, I mean, it'll make my purchase feel a little bit more justified. I mean, if it can at least start delivering the promise of what the system was supposed to do in the first place. So that'll be pretty cool. But we'll see. But yeah, I mean, it does have me pretty excited though, right? And not just so that maybe I can finally get the full benefit of the system here. And then I would imagine 2.0 rolls out, and let's just say it does fix a lot of issues, but it'll probably still be a bit glitchy in some areas. So we'll probably still have to wait for a few more patches until it's probably more ironed out. But it's still exciting though, and we'll see what comes of that there.
One other bit of news, though, that came out fairly recently and was just getting caught up on the story on this. So I don't have the complete full details, but I did watch a bit of a video on this. And so it's kind of cool. Sometimes it's interesting on. I think I talked about it in one episode before where, just sometimes hearing what happened in the background as far as like video games that didn't get released or they took a long time to come out, or and then years later you find out what happened, or games that never just got released but you heard rumors about. And so it's interesting, right, when some of this information came out. And so I don't understand completely how this happened, but it looks like somebody got a hold of some I guess documents and videos and things on a hard drive of a game that was being made by Monolith Software, I believe. Uh, so this is so Monolith, not the ones from Xenoblade Chronicles, but the guys that have done the Shadow of Mordor games. And so they're under the Warner Brothers umbrella of, publishers and all. And so they because I do recall back in this time, so this would have been in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that they were working on some kind of, there was, or that, well, not them specifically, I didn't know that, but that there was rumors that there was a Batman game being created that was set around in the Christopher Nolan Batman universe. And but then ultimately we got the Batman Arkham games, and those games are amazing, and all was said and done as far as like a Batman game in that time frame, games that were coming out. And now those games don't have anything to do with the art or the Nolan movie. But so what was uncovered was that, yes, indeed, that Monolith was working on this Batman game set within the Nolan universe. I didn't quite catch exactly like where in the timeline. I think I heard something like it was going to be in between The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, something like that. But it was going to be a third person action adventure game from what it looks like. Seems like it might have had like similar combat style to the Arkham games, at least, where, it's a beat 'em up. And because there was a lot of video that was uncovered on this, right? Like early prototypes of the game. And so what I understand is that the game was being worked on from roughly about 2 years or so. And so the information that was uncovered was from development of this game from around 2009 to 2010. And so there's a lot of videos of the game where it just kind of shows like they're testing out, level designs, combat, lip syncing, and things like that. So the game is not finished or anything, but you can kind of tell what they were, more or less what they were looking at. And also, one of the interesting things too is that somehow it was going to try to implement the Nemesis system that we got in the Shadow of Mordor games. Now, if you don't know what that is, in the Shadow of Mordor, they're actually really cool games, and definitely would recommend checking them out if it's an open world game set in the Lord of the Rings sort of setting. And in this game, well, in that game there with the Nemesis system is that, you're going around and then you have these orcs that you have to defeat. But sometimes there's, so like you'll pick an orc to try to combat. And then if it kills you, it gets stronger. But then I think if you kill it, eventually you get more, I think like you get more rewards from it. It's been a while since I played that game, but, and so, and then each one has certain different skills and all, but then sometimes they'll fight amongst each other as well too. So it's a really cool system. It's very unique, and it's the only game that I know that uses that. Well, that and Shadow of War, right? Its sequel. But again, a part of that might be because I believe they ended up patenting that, which, that's a whole other discussion. But supposedly some version of this Nemesis system was going to be used in this Batman game. So that, it's very interesting. I definitely recommend checking it out. There's a lot of videos on it that you can find online now. And it's interesting what it could have been. Ultimately we got the Arkham games, and, I was more than happy with those there. But that also seems to be part of the reason why they stopped it. So from what has been uncovered, it seems like it was stopped because the Arkham games were doing really well. And also that Christopher Nolan, if you're anything familiar with not only his Batman movies, but just his work in general, he's very much likes to stick to a certain style. There's not a whole lot of marketing that, happens on his movies, even with the Batman games or the Batman movies. There wasn't a whole lot of like merchandise and all. At least it didn't seem like that, because he's very much more of a grounded sort of take on whatever he's doing, right? If you just look at his trailer of his upcoming Odyssey movie, the Odyssey is very much based like in fantasy and such, but it looks more grounded, right? Than maybe like other takes of this of that story. And the same thing with like the Batman movies that he did. They're very more grounded, like, and all. And so it sounds like he had already been burnt, or because I know there was a Batman Begins game that came out on the 6th generation consoles, and that game, I haven't played it, but I guess it did okay. Nothing, it's not great, it's not horrible. But it sounds like he was kind of put off by like just making a video game based off of his movie properties, because it doesn't seem to fit his style, right? And so that seems to be another part of it too. Also, that they never really got his blessing either. And so after about 2 years or so, it looks like it was just canned for those reasons there. But it's very interesting though. And again, you can find a lot of videos and everything of what was uncovered, online. So I would recommend checking it out if you have any interest in that there. But then just the last little bit of thing that I wanted to touch base on here. I just wanted to make mention of this cool little device that I got. My wife got me for my birthday that was recently here. And so a lot of my gaming that I do nowadays is on handheld. And so I have a lot of little retro handheld devices, and along with like the Switch and the Portal and such. But it's the RG28XX. So if you're not familiar with those retro handhelds, so there's a company called Ambernick. I believe they're out of China. And so they do a lot of these little retro handhelds, and they come in a lot of different forms. And so it seems like they're coming out with one like almost every month. It's insane. So, and I plan to do maybe something about like retro emulation devices, just to like a very beginner's like take on them. And if you're hearing about them, and if you have any interest in trying to get into them, I might try to do that, just to at least try to point you in the right direction of like what is out there, what are these companies, why are they so popular, and all that stuff. So I might try to do something like that. But basically this device here, it's like a small little handheld, almost like micro sized. So kind of think of the Game Boy Micro, Advanced Micro that came out, back in the day. It's very tiny. It's a horizontal form factor, but it's a fairly decent or fairly powerful little device. So like I have also another handheld from them, the RG35XX Plus. The names are weird, but I mean that system there can emulate up to the Dreamcast and the PSP with pretty good results. Now they don't have an analog stick, so it's probably not the best thing to play those games on that system, but it can technically emulate up to that there. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty, it's just cool to have it, in like, such a powerful little device in your, that you can fit almost in the palm of your hands. Well, this RG28XX it has the same chipset, so meaning that it can emulate just as well, only in a lot smaller thing. So what I've been really liking about it is that, I'm just keeping games from like anywhere from like the second to the fourth generation on there. So like more 2D based games, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's because it's so small. It's really easy to carry around, and just take it out if you want to get a quick gameplay session. And so what I like about it is that it's my goal with it anyways is to try to use something like that more instead of just, on my phone doom scrolling. Not that playing video games is, much more productive, but at the very least for me, it just tries to keep my brain more engaged in something that I really enjoy doing instead of just doom scrolling, right? And I mean, it's I'm just trying to get myself away from that there more. But yeah, cool little device though, and yeah, I was pretty happy that she got that for me there. I had it on my Amazon wish list, and I was like, I might get it at some point. And so apparently she ended up going on there and got it. So that was very nice of her. But cool little device, and like I might try to do something on this here just to again explain what these retro handholds are if you're someone that has no familiarity with them. All right, but let's start getting into 2003. And so we're going to start going first here with stats and numbers and all that fun stuff there. Let's see, because 2003, pretty good year in gaming. Just at a quick thought of like what this year brought and all. There was, every year always has like some really good years, right? Now it's not going to be quite as good for me as like, say, of course, like 2001 was. But it's still an excellent year, and we got a lot of cool stuff. So, but we're still kind of in the in-between years, right, of a generation. So for the sixth generation, and like I said before, though, the sixth generation was just one of the best of all time. It's just truly incredible. But let's go over here with some information on this year here. So 2003 saw many sequels, prequels, and video games such as Tony Hawk's Underground, Madden NFL 2004, NBA Live 2004, ESPN NBA basketball, Saya no Ura, the Song of Saya, Final Fantasy X2, Mario Kart Double Dash, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Sonic Heroes, Postal 2, Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic, Uru: Age of Ages Beyond Mist, and WWE SmackDown: Here Comes the Pain. New intellectual properties include Beyond Good and Evil, but Buktai: The Sun Is in Your Hands, Call of Duty, this Gaia, I think is how you pronounce that. Drakengard, Manhunt, Planet Slide, Trackmania, True Crime, Streets of LA, and Beautiful Joe. The year's best-selling video game worldwide was Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. The fifth time a Pokemon game was the annual worldwide top seller. So yeah, Pokemon Mania is in full effect, and those are they're selling like crazy. So let's see. All right, so events that happened this year. So on February 27th, the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences hosts 6th Annual Interactive Achievements Awards, inducts Yu Suzuki of Sega to the AIAS Hall of Fame. Oh, that's cool. And March 6th through 9th, Game Developers Conference hosts 3rd Annual Game Developers Choice Awards, and Gamma Network's 5th Annual Independent Game Festival, IGF. NX Corporation and Square Company officially merged, forming Square Enix Company Ltd. So yeah, let's touch base a little bit on this here. So now you see, it's Square Enix, right? Because before there were Squaresoft, and so these were the two major juggernauts that formed, and it was a kind of a big deal because these companies were just very influential, had an incredible output of games, and they were merging now. And so again, if you're for some reason not know who these companies are, so Squaresoft was basically the company behind the Final Fantasy games, and then NX was the company behind the Dragon Quest games, and also some other really good action RPGs mainly, but some other video games too. And so they merged here, and I mean, I will say, when this merger happened, I remember it was a big deal in the news and all, like when the video game news anyways. And I gotta say, though, that ever since this merger happened, and I don't know, it's maybe something I want to do a little bit more deep diving into, and actually, now that I'm looking at it, let's maybe start going into this here, because this was kind of a big deal here. And so, because for me personally, ever since this merger happened, at least from the Square Soft part of the company, it feels like just their overall quality, their style and everything kind of took a bit of a downturn, as I don't know, I'm just not, I don't know. It just, that's what it seems like anyways to me. I mean, NX seems to still be doing some pretty cool stuff, but with I don't know, Squaresoft, it became a little bit, it just didn't have like that magic touch that they used to have. So I'm going to read a little bit about it here and see if maybe we can kind of uncover a little bit of information on just what this whole merger entailed. But let's see. So Square Enix Holdings, a Japanese multinational holding company, video game publisher, and entertainment conglomerate, it releases role-playing games such franchises such as Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, and Kingdom Hearts, among numerous others. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's see. So the original Square Enix company was formed in April 2003 from a merger between Square and Enix, with the latter as the surviving company. Each share of Square's common stock was exchanged for 0.85 shares of Enix's common stocks. NX or Enix? Square Enix. So yeah, Enix. Okay. At the time, 80% of Square Enix staff were made up of former Square employees. Excuse me. As part of the merger, former Square president Yoichi Wada was appointed the president of the new corporation, while former NX president Keiji Honda was named vice president. Yasuhiro Fukushima, the largest shareholder of the combined corporation and founder of NX, became chairman. In October 2008, Square Enix conducted a company split between its corporate business and video game operations, reorganizing itself as the holdings company Square Enix Holdings Company. While its internally domestic video game operations were formed under the subsidiary Square Enix Company. The group operates American, Chinese, and European branches based in Los Angeles, Beijing, Paris, Hamburg, and London, respectively. Let's see. Several of Square Enix's franchises have sold over 10 million copies worldwide after 2020, with Final Fantasy selling 173 million, Dragon Quest selling 85 million, and Kingdom Hearts shipping 36 million. In 2005, Square Enix acquired arcade corporation Taito. Oh, I didn't know that. In 2009, Square Enix acquired Eidos. I do remember that. The parent company of British game developer Eidos Interactive, which absorbed its European branch. Square Enix is headquartered in Shinjuku, Eastside Square Building in Shinjuku, Tokyo, along with the second office in Osaka. It has over 5,000 employees worldwide through its base operations and subsidiaries. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So this is kind of what I wanted to read here. So a merger between Square and Enix was considered since at least 2000. The financial failure in 2001 of Square. Square's first movie, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, made Enix reluctant to proceed with Square while Square was losing money. With the company facing its second year of financial losses, Square approached Sony for a capital injection. And on October 8, 2001, Sony purchased an 18.6% stake in Square. Following the success of both Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts, the company's finances stabilized, and it's recorded the highest operating margin in its history in the fiscal year of 2002. It was announced on November 25th, 2002, that Square and Enix previous plans to merge were to officially proceed, intending to decrease development costs and to compete with foreign developers. As described by Square President and CEO Yoichi Wada, Square has also fully recovered, meaning this merger is occurring at a time when both companies are at their height. Some shareholders expressed concerns about the merger, notably Miyamoto, the founder and largest shareholder of Square, who would find himself holding a significantly smaller percentage of the combined companies. Other criticisms came from Takashi Oya of Dochi Securities, who expressed doubts about the benefits of such a merger. Enix outsources games development and has few in-house creators, while Square does everything by itself. The combination of the two provides no negative factors, but would bring little in the way of operational synergies. Miyamoto's concerns were eventually resolved by altering the exchange ratio of the merger so that each Square share would be exchanged for 0.85 Enix shares rather than the 0.81 shares, and the merger was greenlit. The merger was set for April 1st, 2003, on which date the newly merged entity Square Enix became into being. At the time of the merger, 80% of Square Enix staff were made up of former Square employees. As part of the merger, former Square president Yoichi Wada was appointed the president of the new corporation, while former Enix president Keiji Honda became its vice president. The founder of Enix and the largest shareholder of the newly combined corporation, Yasuhiro Fukushima, was made its honorary chairman. As a result of the merger, Enix was the surviving company and the Square company was dissolved. In July of that year, Square Enix headquarters were moved to Yoyogi, Shibuya, Tokyo, to help combine the two companies. Okay, so post-merger and acquisitions. To strengthen its wireless market, Square Enix acquired mobile application developer UIE Evolution in March 2004, which was sold in December 2007, and the company instead founded its own Square Enix Mobile Studio in January 2008 to focus on mobile products. In January 2005, Square Enix founded Square Enix China, expanding their interest in the People's Republic of China. In September 2005, Square Enix bought the gaming developer and publisher Taito, renowned for their arcade hits such as Space Invaders and the Bubble Bobble series. Taito's home and portable console game divisions were merged into Square Enix itself by March 2010. In August 2008, Square Enix made plans for a similar expansion by a way of a friendly takeover of video game developer Tecmo by purchasing shares at a 30% premium, but Tecmo rejected the proposed takeover. Tecmo would later merge with Koei in April 2009 to form Koei Tecmo. Excuse me. In April 2007, Square Enix Ltd. CEO John Yamamoto became CEO of Square Enix. In 2008-2009, Square Enix was reportedly working with Grin on a Final Fantasy spin-off codenamed Fortress. The project was allegedly canceled by Square Enix after introducing seemingly impossible milestones and without payments made, resulting in Grin declaring bankruptcy and its co-founders blaming Square Enix for being betrayed. On January 8th, 2009, Square Enix signed an agreement with Ubisoft where their former would work to assist the latter in distributing their video games in Japan. In February 2009, Square Enix announced a takeover deal for Eidos, formerly SCI Entertainment, the holdings company for Eidos Interactive. The UK-based publisher assets include Tomb Raider, Hitman, Deus Ex, Thief, and Legacy of Kain franchises, along with subsidiary development studios Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and IO Interactive that developed the games. The acquisition of Eidos was completed in April 2009, and in November, it was merged with Square Enix and a European publishing organization business unit, Square Enix Europe. Eidos' U.S. operations were merged with Square Enix Incorporated. In April 2010, a new Japanese label for Western games bearing zero restrictions called Square Enix Extreme Edges was announced. In 2010, Mike Fisher was appointed CEO of Square Enix. Square Enix founded the mobile development studio Hippos Lab in March 2011 and Square Enix Montreal in 2012. In June 2011, Stainless Games had purchased the rights to Carmageddon from Square Enix. In July 2011, it was reported that Square Enix closed their Los Angeles studios. In January 2012, Square Enix North America office could pursue smaller niche mobile and social media games due to its existing revenue streams. And in October 2012, Square Enix was perceived as a force in mobile games by Kotaku. The price of Final Fantasy Dimensions and Demon scored $30 and $44 respectively was criticized. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much more into that there, but it looks like there's a bunch of more information on here regarding it. But basically, I don't know, at least from the Squaresoft side of things, and as you can see, right, they were purchasing a lot of companies, and so some of them seem to make sense, but other ones, like, for example, the whole Eidos purchase that they did later on, and I won't go into too much here because that goes into later years, but it just didn't seem to make sense. But basically, since this merger happened, I just felt like, at least with my favorite series, Final Fantasy, right, this is where it kind of started taking a downturn on things, and I feel like this merger might have just been a part of that, where the company was just starting to lose its identity, more specifically, again, on the Squaresoft side, because the Dragon Quest games have still been great, but the Final Fantasy games, they're not bad. I've like, let's see, the games that came out after this, so it was Final Fantasy 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and then, some spinoffs. But for me personally, like, out of all those games there, I mean, I've liked them. I mean, I can't speak on 14, and I know that game is really popular for people that are into those kind of RPGs, but like 12 was okay. It's not bad. I do like 12. I shouldn't say it's okay. It's pretty good. But, it started to feel a bit different. 13, I mean, I enjoy it, but it's a bit rough to get into. And then 15, kind of the same thing. I mean, it's different, but I still found some enjoyment with it. And 16, I actually did really like. I did enjoy 16. But, they just definitely still felt, though, that it wasn't the quality of, like, the previous Final Fantasy games, again, for me personally. And so, yeah, I mean, this is sort of the start of that there, at least for what I feel like anyways. But anyways, just want to share a bit of information on that little merger there. But let's get back to the events, though. So on May 14th through 16th, the 9th annual E3 held at Los Angeles Convention Center, and the 6th annual Game Critics Award for the Best of E3. July, IEME hosts 4th annual Executive Summit. July 16, the Interactive Digital Software Association, renamed as Entertainment Software Association, or ESA for short. Excuse me. September 12th, this is a big one here. So Valve releases their game distribution software, Steam, out of beta. So Steam will be known to become probably the biggest digital storefront for video games out there. I mean, I think it's bigger than like the PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo eShops, right? I think. I'm not sure. But October 1st, DreamWorks, SKG, and Tecmo announced a movie adaptation of the video game Fatal Frame has been fast-tracked with John Rogers and Steven Spielberg's involvement. Did we ever get that movie, though? I don't think so. Could be wrong. I can't think of a Fatal Frame movie. Well, anyway. October 12th to the 18th, the 2003 World Cyber Games are held. October 20th, the families of Aaron Hamill and Kimberly Beatty, two young adults shot by teens William and John Buckner, who in a statement to investigators claimed their actions were inspired by Grand Theft Auto 3, file a U.S. $246 million lawsuit against developer Rockstar, publisher Take-Two Interactive Software, retailer Walmart, and console maker Sony Computer Entertainment. Oh, yikes. Yeah, that's horrible. I do remember that story a bit now that I'm thinking about it. I didn't remember the names, but yeah, that's horrible what happened. But October 31st, so the British Academy of Film and Television Arts announces the nominations for the 6th annual BAFTA Interactive Entertainment Award will instead be split between the first annual BAFTA Game Awards for video game publications and on November 24th, the BAFTA Interactive Awards for Multimedia Technologies, ceremonies to be held in February 2004. In November, Kazushige Nojima resigns from Square Enix. December 2nd, the inaugural Spike Video Game Awards are held. The first PlayStation Portable prototype shown by Sony. Oh. And Nintendo states its next generation console would be fully compatible with the GameCube. Let's see, so just some business stuff. So in early 2003, Compile goes defunct. Compile, I believe they're like the developers of some pretty cool shooters, right? Like Robo Leste, Musha, and let's see, I'm trying to look it up here. But of course it doesn't want to load up. Okay. Okay, well, anyways, I guess it went defunct. February 19th, Microsoft announces a deal to buy Kinetics Corporation, Take-Two Interactive buys TDK Media Active. May 7th, Infogrames Entertainment SA rebrands all its subsidiaries under the Atari brand. Enix Corporation officially absorbs Square Company, forming Square Enix Company. CNN Money reports that video games are in US dollars $10 billion industry. Damn. April, Pan-European Game Information, European video game content rating system comes into use. In May, the 3DO company announces bankruptcy and closes down its New World Computing subsidiary. June 12th, Obsidian Entertainment is founded. August 1st, excuse me, Virgin Interactive is renamed to Avalon Interactive by its owner, Titus Software. In August, Microsoft announced ATI as developer of the GPU for their next generation console, Project Xenon. Their previous contract with NVIDIA was finished, but the GPU of the Xbox continued in production. Oh, no, yeah, it was finished, but the GPU of the GPU. Okay, never mind. September, Silicon Dream Studios goes defunct. In December, Interplay closes Black Owl Studios division. In late 2003, Nintendo buys shares from Japanese toy and animation conglomerate Bandai, making Nintendo one of Bandai's top 10 shareholders. And in late 2003, Data East goes defunct. Oh, really? Well, I mean, I knew that they weren't around anymore, but it looks like that's what happened. So Data East, they made like games like a lot of cool arcade games like Bad Boys. No, not Bad Boys. Bad Dudes. Some other ones I can't quite think of, but yeah, hey, bummer. They made some pretty cool stuff. back in the day. Let's see. And seem to be having a little bit of technical issues. All right, well that's cool. Right as I was starting to wonder why when I was trying to look at some of the information on online there, it wasn't working, and sure enough, right when I said there was some technical issues, I just put it on pause for a bit to try to see what's going on, and then I immediately afterwards got a text that my internet is in my area is out. So sorry, I'm probably not going to be able to go over some of the financial, like the like the games that sold the most and all this year. My thought would be that, I mean, if we're going from like games from last year, it would have been Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I'm sure carried over to this year. But then I did read earlier that the Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire game sold a lot this year as well too. And I would imagine your Maddens and things like that sold really well. I'm assuming too also. But if it happens to come back up, I'll try to go back in there and as I'm recording this and go over some of that information. But otherwise, I don't know. Sounds like my internet is down though, and it's supposed to be back up by 11, and it is 7:30 as I'm recording this. So, all right. So yeah. So, and that's just kind of what I do here with this podcast. It's not, again, the whole point of this is more of a casual conversation. So we're not so much like actual, like more professional, I guess. But yeah, but I'll go back to it if it comes back up, but if not, we'll just keep on rolling here. But this year, though, I do have my notes here, though, that are offline. So one thing that this year was really cool on, though, was that it was a really cool year for multi-platform games. And that is what made this generation just so great, right? We had a lot of great exclusive games on the consoles that were out now. So again, the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, the Xbox, and even the Game Boy Advance. And there was a lot of cool stuff that was coming out for them, but exclusively. But there was also a lot of cool games that were coming out on all the systems, or at least more than one. And so as I started going through the list of the games that came out this year, I was like, wait a minute. I was like, there's actually a lot of cool stuff that all of the system benefited from. And yeah, in some cases, some were better versions than on the others. Like, for example, I think I mentioned before that one of the things that I really liked about the Xbox was that that's where you would get the better, in most cases, the better looking and sounding version. And for me, that was kind of a big deal because, so I'll touch base on this a little bit here, is so it was around this year here in 2003 that I ended up, no, was it this year or maybe it was next year? I forgot. But basically this is, I'll just talk about this here just because it kind of deals with like multi-platform games. But so for many years up to this point, I had been gaming on just the CRTV, like a regular tube CRT TV, right? None of the more fancier ones. And I remember for the longest time, so growing up, going back to like the 8-bit days and all, we had a small little Emerson TV that had the buttons on the side. I think it was like up to 13 buttons where you can press to which channel you wanted to go to view, and then you could connect your game system on either channel 3 or 4. And what I remember about this TV also was that it had an option on how you wanted the video signal to come out. But this is sort of the start of where I really started getting into what kind of video signal I wanted to see. So there was a little dial that you would turn one way or the other, and if you turned it one way, the picture would be a little bit more blurry-ish, and if you turned it the other way, it would be a little bit sharper, but perhaps a little too sharp. And so I remember me and my brother used to switch that little dial there, so like I preferred the more sharper version and he could prefer the more blurrier version. But yeah, so we gamed on that TV for quite a while. But then roughly around when we started getting maybe towards the end of the Genesis, when we had on the 4th generation, and then when we got the Saturn or so in the PlayStation, it was like a Magnavox CRT TV that was a 27-inch, so it was a bit bigger and all. But it was still just like your basic tube TV. And that TV we had for quite a while. So when we were living at my parents' house, that's what we had. but then eventually he moved out. But then around the time that he moved out, I did also. Um, and that was the main TV that we had for a while. But then eventually, at one point, once we got our own, more settled into our own apartment, or into our apartment, and I would have my own room. And so I bought myself just a small little Magnavox TV. Again, kind of the same that my brother had, but it was like a 13-inch TV. So it wasn't anything too major, right? And that's what I was gaming on after that, mainly, because we had the other 27-inch TV in the living room. And so that was it. That's what I had for for a while. But then it was around this time though here, and again, I'm working, I'm getting my own money, and then I was starting to find out about what like progressive scan is and Dolby Digital. And so again, I would always had a fascination in trying to get the best possible picture out of my games and sound also. And so now that I had some money, I started looking up like, okay, what are like the best kind of TVs? And so I kept hearing about these flat screen TVs. So there are still CRT TVs, but with a flat screen that supposedly gives a much better image. And then I was starting to learn about S-video and component cables. And so the first TV that I bought, it was I think it was like a 27-inch TV, so it was bigger now than the 13-inch TV that I had, and it was a flat screen TV from Sony, I believe, and then I got some S-video cables for all my systems. So what I ended up doing was I built this kind of like a entertainment center that could house um, all my game consoles and my TV. And I think my dad helped me build that thing there because I just made it out of just basic, wood and all that I got from whatever hardware store at the time. And so I had my 27-inch TV notched in there, and then I had we made the shelves for all the consoles. So I had the GameCube, the Dreamcast, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox all hooked up. And I bought like this switcher that you can switch between all the different devices, and I had it all set up on S-video first. And then I also bought a surround sound from let's see, the surround sound that I first bought was an RCA surround sound, and it was an okay one. And also that was my first setup that I had. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. And I remember the first time I saw something on the flat screen TV there, right? Again, 27-inch. So again, it sounds like nothing nowadays, right? And all, but if you know anything about like CRT TVs back then and all, they would give a really crisp image. And especially because I had it connected to S-video. Now this is a 4:3 TV though, so it wasn't the widescreen yet. But it looked really stunning. And I think the first game that I popped in there was Rygar, the Legendary Adventures. I thought that game looked really excellent back then. And I was just blown away by just how crisp and clean everything looked. I was like, holy crap. Like this is almost like mind changing on how much better everything looks. And so then again, I started doing a bit more research on this, and also only had that set up for a little bit. Because what happened also, it was kind of a perfect timing because I ended up working at this at Rent-A-Center. So if anybody knows about Rent-A-Center and all, it's just thinking about the good old days of Rent-A-Center. But anyways, but I had access to getting some TVs and surround sounds and all for a pretty good price. And so what I ended up getting afterwards, because I only had that set up for the 27-inch TV that I had for just a little bit, because again, I'm starting to do more research and all, and eventually I'm starting to find out about, again, progressive scan. Oh, and games are coming out in widescreen, and oh, what's Dolby Digital? And so eventually I got a 32-inch widescreen TV from Philips, and it was a progressive scan also. So that I bought all these component cables. I bought a new switcher that I can hook up multiple systems on through component cable now. And then I also got this Sony 600-watt surround sound system too that could, again, they could do Dolby Digital. And so I bought all the cables for it. And also I was learning a lot of this stuff. And also it helped out that I was working there because I was helping people connect their devices up too as well. And so I got to learn a lot about, again, all that video output and things like that, right? So I kind of nerded out about that there. And so with this new TV, though, and I remember now the first time I saw something in progressive scan, it just blew my mind away, right? And all, and again, on these CRT TVs, the picture looks super crisp. I mean, I only have the memories of it now, right? But it seems like it, I just remember, I mean, when I saw something in high definition for the first time, it was truly mind blowing too. But I feel like it seemed almost crisper back then on a CRT TV in progressive scan. That's just my memory of it. Maybe I'm not thinking about things correctly. But I just remember being so floored by how everything looked. And so going back to the multi-platform thing, so one of the reasons, again, I used to like getting the games on the Xbox was because a lot of them outputted in progressive scan and had the Dolby Digital. And what I liked about it is that on my stereo system, so I hooked up, with the digital optics cable that you could, to get Dolby Digital from. And so on the front of the stereo system, it had like this blue little light that if the Dolby Digital kicked in, that would turn on. So that was like a cue, right? Like, oh, okay, now this is in Dolby Digital. And most of the Xbox games outputted in Dolby Digital, so the sound came out a little bit deeper, a little bit better sounding. But even if it didn't, I still had it all hooked up where they can come out in the because after a while, a lot of PlayStation 2 and GameCube games outputted in Dolby Pro Logic 2, Dolby Surround Pro Logic 2, which still sounded pretty good. And so I had this nice stereo system, and at the time I was living at home with my parents, so I was in my room, and so I had this all out the surround sound outfitted where I had the side speakers, on the hanging up on the walls that they would kind of be pointing towards me, and then the stereo system or the surround system, and then the TV and all my consoles were in front of me, and that stretch right there from when I had that set up, which lasted me for a few years, and towards the middle to the last leg of the sixth generation, for me was an amazing setup that I had, at least within my means, budget means at the time. And it's just where I started really finding an appreciation for not only the video games themselves, but also how they looked, and also like the how good you can get the images to look, and the surround sound as well too, because that really elevated the experience for me. And so the Xbox became my system that I would use, where if a game was multi-platform, so a lot of the ones I'm going to read off here, I would get it on the Xbox mainly for that reason there. Now, ultimately, they look pretty good on all the systems. Just the Xbox tended to run the games a little bit better in most cases, not all, but anyways, just wanted to share that there, is that this is where I was really geeking out on this kind of stuff. As like, again, I'm looking at all these names here. I was like, yeah, I remember I used to get these games on the Xbox for that reason there. And yeah, I remember I used to crank up the sound and just, have some gaming sessions there. And I was a bit of a loner during the time. And so, that was just a way that I would be able to entertain myself and get my mind off of things there during that stretch there. But yeah, it was really cool though. It's a lot of cool gaming experiences that I had on that setup there. But so let's just go over some of the games here that came out during that stretch that were multi-platform. So there was like the Tony Hawk's Underground series. So this is starting to go like open world now. It had like mission objectives you can do. I kind of messed around with it a little bit, and I think you can get off your skateboard and explore a city. But I remember I kind of got turned off by the formula there. So this is where I didn't really get into the Tony Hawk's game too much, because I remember I did buy it, but again, I just didn't really get too much into it. But I know it has its fans out there. So this is in the public side. Tony Hawk's was still pretty relevant during the stretch here. But then we got a Midnight Club 2, which is a really cool kind of open world racing game. And actually, I kind of want to try this game out again, because I really enjoyed this one. Part 1 came out around the launch of the PlayStation 2, and I don't think it did. I don't think it had too much, fanfare around it. But Part 2, though, was pretty cool, and it was released on the PlayStation 2 and on the Xbox, and it had an excellent soundtrack. I remember for that. And just overall, a really fun racing game that was... I know it was published by Rockstar. I don't know who actually developed it. Maybe one of their gaming divisions. But yeah, really fun racing game. It's really excellent. And then we had the first original Sonic game, 3D Sonic game that came out. And this ended up getting ported to all the 3 systems, so GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. And that was Sonic Heroes. And, I haven't really played too much of this game. Again, so many of these games I own, but I didn't really play them much back then. And like I've said before, though, in previous episodes, I sold off a lot of my collection, but I do remember having this on the Xbox. But I remember I really liked the way it looked. I thought it was really colorful, looked really great. And I like the concept of like you're alternating between the 3 characters depending, and then, and then all the different teams you can select on it. So maybe I'll try to give this game a shot again, because it seemed pretty fun at the time. But yeah, basically you like, for example, you can be Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and each one has a certain strength. So like Sonic is fast, Sonic will help you fly, and then you got your brawler like Knuckles, and so you alternate between the three to help you get over objectives in the levels. But then you can do like the Shadow team, I think it's called, or I forgot the team names and all, but there's like different teams that you can select, right? That to kind of keep the game varied a bit. But one game though that I really enjoyed though, and it was one of my more favorite games that came out this year, and that was the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. And so this was a reboot of the series, so to speak, and it started introducing like this play mechanics that we would see later on, like in other games in the down the road, but where it's like a platforming game, but the platforming is like, so you're doing wall scaling and the which is as simple as that sounds, but that started becoming really popular, like for example, like in series like the Uncharted series, right? Or even the Tomb Raider series later on. And so just made for some really fun platforming segments. I really enjoyed a lot of a lot of those sections there. It's just really fun to play through, and had a really great story to it too. And just overall was my favorite Prince of Persia game. I really think this one is excellent, this first one. And pretty good graphics for the time. Again, they're going to look more or less the same on each platform, but again, the Xbox One might have benefited from being the only one with progressive scan and Dolby Digital, which I don't know for sure if the other ones had progressive scan or not. But anyways, really excellent game though, and the combat to it can be a little bit frustrating, and it does get a little bit repetitive with it. But the platforming and the puzzle solving and all more than makes up for it, and truly makes for an incredible game, and really one of my more favorite games of this year. I absolutely love it, and actually now that I'm talking about it, I kind of want to go through another playthrough of this game. And it's so good. I really enjoyed this game a lot. But another game from Ubisoft, as Prince of Persia was published by Ubisoft, was Beyond Good and Evil. And so Beyond Good and Evil, I just talked about it earlier, right? With one of the games that I selected on my Relay of Gaming. So I'll put up a little video short on this game later on throughout the week here. But yeah, Beyond Good and Evil, so I already talked about it a bit. But yeah, really excellent game. And again, came out on all three systems. More or less, I've played at least emulated versions of at least the GameCube one, and then the original one that I had on the Xbox. And it seemed to run really well on all three of them. So yeah, excellent. Actually, I think the PlayStation 2 did struggle a bit in performance, if I remember. But anyways, either way, there's the 20th anniversary edition you can get nowadays. So it's you can play like a more polished version of that game. But really great game there. But then we also had some pretty cool hack and slash games based around the Lord of the Rings IP. And so I forgot to mention it last year, but so the Lord of the Rings movies were coming out, right, in 2001, 2002, and then Return of the King came out in 2003. Just amazing movies, right? Those, I actually started watching the Lord of the Rings again recently. I was actually popped in the Fellowship of the Ring last night. I just got about an hour into it, and damn, those movies are so good. They're so good. But anyways, so last year a game came out based on the second movie, so The Two Towers, and it was published by Electronic Arts. I don't know who the developer was, though. Stormfront Studios, I believe, maybe. I'm not sure. But there was a pretty cool hack and slash game, and very cinematic, and just overall definitely gave you the vibe, right, of being, in this movie world. But then this year we got The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, and just really, they were really fun hack and slash action games. And so again, right, they take you through the different settings of the movies, and you also get like video clips of the movies and all. And just remember, they were really well played too, also. So definitely were fun games to get during this stretch here. And again, I'm pretty sure this one came out on all the three systems as well too. But then there was Legacy of Kain Defiance. And so, these games kind of, Legacy of Kain, it has some popularity to it, but then like Soul Reaver 2, and then this one here, it just seemed like they kind of got buried between all these other incredible games. But they're really good games though. And actually, Legacy of Kain Defiance is available now to buy on the. I think you can buy it, or maybe it's just on the PlayStation Plus. Like if you have the subscription to that, but it's on there that you can get somehow, and so that's pretty cool because it feels like the sort of a niche game, but it was the I guess the end of the story arc that it was telling here, and pretty cool because now you're controlling between Kane and Raziel, and just made for so this one it improved on some of the combat. But just overall, yeah, excellent games. The Legacy of King games are really great. Um, Need for Speed Underground. So here's another game that came out on all three systems and an excellent racing game. I really enjoyed this one. I remember I got into the soundtrack quite a bit. There was a song by Rob Zombie, I believe it's called Two Lane Blacktop, that I just used to enjoy playing this game, cranking up the sound, and because I remember I'd have it on the Xbox, and yeah, I just really enjoyed this racing game. I used to have a fun time playing this. Not a great racing games during the stretch here, where they're a lot of like more arcadey kind of racing games, and out of like the Need for Speed games, I don't know, this one and also like the Hot Pursuit are really good, but I'll talk more about Hot Pursuit later, in a later year. But yeah, this one was really good. This and part two, which comes out, I believe, next year. We'll talk more about that one there too. But either way, though, this one was really cool. And there's a cool part where it has like these drag street racing where, you're just basically going down a stretch, right, as fast as you can. And the graphical effects that it did on that look really cool. And the sound effects too. I mean, you can definitely tell that they were trying to mimic what was coming out like in those Fast and the Furious movies at the time, because the first one had come out around this time, maybe, the year before, but they became really popular. So I'm sure they were trying to capitalize on that, the popularity of that movie there. We also had another game from EA Games, and that was SSX3. And so this game here, just a hell of a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one, and it was yeah, just a lot of fun. I kind of for the same reason that I was really, because those Tony Hawk kind of started losing me after a bit, but this one picked up the slack though, as far as like these kind of like extreme sports games, and just had a lot of fun with this game, just going through all the different modes and competing in all these races and doing tricks on it and all. I mean, games like this and Need for Speed Underground, for me, again, I generally like more adventure RPG games, but I would have a lot of fun with these kind of games as well too. And I miss this stretch here from EA Games because they were doing a lot of. So I'm already talked about some of them, right? So like the Lord of the Rings, the Need for Speed Underground, SSX3, and another game I'll talk here in a bit. But just really were just a lot of fun, kind of arcadey games, and yeah, it was just, they were just outputting a lot of really great games. So this was a different EA from what was, what we know now. And so I do miss this stretch of a lot of the games that they were doing at this time. Because like another game that they did also, well, they published anyways, was I think under the EA Big umbrella, but it was Def Jam Vendetta. Now this game only came out on the PlayStation 2 and on the GameCube, but it's a wrestling game. And it has like a lot of popular rappers at the time, from like DMX to Scarface to Ludacris, and some others. And the wrestling engine that is used in this game was, I think they were called like Aki or something like that, but they were known to be really good wrestling game developers. And so I think that's what a lot of people caught wind on this here, is that, oh, they're doing the wrestling engine on this. That's, that's what it got a lot of people excited too, outside of just, that has a lot of like popular rappers in it. But a really fun concept, really fun game, and cool characters to it, and just overall a blast to play this game. And, obviously you have the really cool soundtrack. The unfortunate thing, though, like about like games like Def Jam Vendetta and the Need for Speed Underground games, is that if for them to be re-released, if they even wanted to do that, again, there's a lot of licensing that gets used in these games, right? From like everything, for example, like the cars and Need for Speed, or the rappers' likenesses and the music and all in Def Jam Vendetta. So yeah, the likelihood of these games getting re-released is pretty much next to none. So emulation would be the way to go on those ones there. But SSX3 did get re-released though, and I think you can still buy it on the digital storefronts for the Xbox.
So like, or because the game is X or backwards compatible on there. I don't know if it's still on there, but I know I have it downloaded on my Xbox Series X. So and that's a great way to play the game too. Also, um, but we also had now this was an interesting concept what they did with this game here. So this is kind of starting to show where games were really becoming popular and trying to get more cinematic, and not only that, also how they were being integrated into movies now, also in a way. So, enter the Matrix. Um, this game, I know it came out on the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. I think it might have came out on the GameCube. I'm not sure, but this was an interesting thing that they were doing. So the game was developed by Shiny Entertainment. So back in the day, from Earthworm Jim, Aladdin. Well, Aladdin, I think that was before they were Earthworm Jim. But anyways, that same team basically. Well, David Perry anyway, spearheading it. But it's interesting what they were doing in this game. So Enter the Matrix was based off of the Matrix universe, right? So the movie, the original one came out in 1999 with Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne. The first one, excellent movie, right? It's really a groundbreaking movie. Really excellent. Uh, Enter the Matrix is sort of, I guess you could say, like a beat 'em up. I get like a 3D beat 'em up that you can utilize some of the bullet time sort of uh, moves, right? That you were seeing not only in the movie but also in like games like Max Payne. And the game is all right. It's only okay. It's a little glitchy. But what they were doing though was pretty interesting though, with not only this game but just the sequels to the Matrix movies, because there was the Matrix Reloaded and then Matrix Revolutions, which I want to say I think they both movies came out in the same year, I think. So it was quite the ambitious project that they had. And I actually liked the Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolution. I think they were good movies, and not as good as the first one, but I still feel that it was pretty good though. They were pretty good. I remember geeking out on these movies at the time. What this movie or what this game did is that it was sort of a supplement to those movies there, because the story takes place, I forgot when exactly in the timeline, but it takes place around the events of the movie. And so they shot a lot of like movie footage that was used only exclusively in this game. And so there's certain parts. Okay, so here's one that I remember. So in the Matrix Reloaded, right? Was it in the Matrix Reloaded? Yes, the one with the freeway chase scene, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So there's a scene right where Morpheus and Trinity get on the freeway, and everyone say like it's a suicide to get on the freeway, right? Because the agents can get you there really easily. Well, as you're on this freeway, you're trying to get away from the agents, and then Morpheus eventually gets up on the top of a semi, finding one of the agents there, and then at one point the agent knocks him off, and he falls down. But then, oh, I forgot the character's name, but G.I. Jane. A little joke there, not G.I. Jane. Jada Pinkett Smith. Fuck, I'm gonna get Will Smith come and slap me now. But she comes. She basically pulls up her car right behind the semi, and so Morpheus falls down on the hood of the car, and she says something like "I got you" or something like that, and then he goes back up and continues fighting the agent. Well, the whole time though, because I remember thinking in the movie, I was like, where did she come from all of a sudden, right? Because she was there with her the guy that she's at least her partner in the movie. I think his name is Ghost. Well, in the game, you play the events that led up to them getting to that point where they were able to save Morpheus. So again, right, it's kind of a cool concept what they had, right? They're trying to sort of make this whole big universe that encompasses, movies and video games and all. And so that was pretty cool. I thought that the project was very ambitious. Unfortunately, again, the game is only all right, but it was, but I remember I did kind of geek out playing the game just because I was into the movie so much at the time that it was sort of cool to see the overall universe expanded like that. But yeah, it was, Enter the Matrix for what it is. I thought it was pretty cool. The game itself, it's okay. Only. But one of the big examples though of how to do a multi-platform release was with Soul Calibur 2 that came out this year.
So Soul Calibur 2. The game had already come out in the arcades, I think, the year prior. And so it's kind of more of the same from what the first Soul Calibur game was doing. And the game looks, really excellent still, too. Only by this time, we'd already been kind of used to these kind of graphics where the first time we saw the first Soul Calibur, it was truly revolutionary. But not to say, I mean, the game is still excellent, though. And what was cool about this one is that so it's kind of more of the same, right? But you get new characters. There was even a character specifically made for the game. I think it was called Necron. I think it was maybe only for the home versions. I'm not sure, but by Todd McFarlane. And so Todd McFarlane, he's a comic book artist and writer for the guy that does Spawn, basically. But what was cool again though about this is that each version, so they came out on the one on the PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube. They got a unique character that you can select. And so on the PlayStation 2, you had Heihachi from Tekken, which, Heihachi's cool, but, wasn't as cool as the other two, though. And so on the Xbox, you got Spawn. And that was the version that I got back in the day there. Because I really thought the character Spawn was really cool. And so I thought it was pretty cool to, play as him. And then also, again, most multi-platform games I was getting on the Xbox for a reason I've mentioned before. And he plays pretty good in the game from what I recall. I did like using him in that. But then on the GameCube, and I want to say that I don't know if it outsold the other two, because again, the GameCube didn't have as big install base as the PlayStation 2 and then eventually the Xbox. But the one that seemed to be more popular, though, was the GameCube one, surprisingly, because it had Link in it, from The Legend of Zelda. And so that's cool too. I mean, Link and Spawn were definitely cool additions, right, to their respective systems. And so that was just a cool experience, right, and all that. And then also what was cool too is that the cover art of each one was different, that showcased, not only characters from the Soul Calibur, that are originally in the game, but then also their exclusive character. So I thought that was really cool, right? It's just a fun way to do a multi-platform release where each one got an exclusive character. And the GameCube version you can play now on the Nintendo Switch Online, so that's pretty cool. Because again, right, with those games being re-released, it did actually at one point. It was like really short-lived, but they did release Soul Calibur 2, at least, I don't know if on the PlayStation, but at least on the Xbox, because I remember seeing it on there, and then all of a sudden it was gone, and I don't know the story on why that happened, but at the very least, if you have the Nintendo Switch Online, you can get it there, and it has, the version that has Link on it. And then just really quick, I'll just touch base on these two games here that came out on the PC. They would come out eventually on the consoles, but there was Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. And so this game came out on the PC first, and I think it came out later this year also on the Xbox. If it wasn't this year, it was the next year. But Max Payne kind of it was more of the same from what the first one did. Only the story, it's kind of a love story sort of. But I remember being really impressed with the graphics on it back in the day, as some of the faces and all, at least at the time, I thought looked really photorealistic almost. And continued with the cool bullet time gameplay. I think the game was a bit short though, if I recall. But yeah, kind of more of the same. And I remember beating it back then. I just don't recall a whole lot of it, but I enjoyed it though for what it was. And I got the Xbox version. But yeah, I mean, cool game though. And then also on the PC side, we got Call of Duty. So Call of Duty, I could be wrong on some of this, but I think they were made up of developers of the Medal of Honor series, but then they kind of started doing their own thing. And so Call of Duty was a World War II military shooter, kind of sort of the same as Medal of Honor. And yeah, it was, I mean, the first one, I didn't play it on the PC, but it seemed like it was getting some popularity. And well, I mean, we know now Call of Duty is like one of the biggest franchises ever, right? But this is where it started. It started on the PC. It came out, I believe, the next year, because I do recall there was a version of it that came out on the Xbox and the PlayStation 2. I got the one on the Xbox. It was called like Call of Duty. I forgot what it was called, but it was like a version I think made for the consoles exclusively, I believe. But yeah, that's where this series got its name. And We'll probably be hearing about this series a lot more as years go. But let's see. So the Game Boy Advance, it was coming out with a lot of great stuff. And, the one interesting thing, though, about the Game Boy was that it never really had an exclusive Mario game, though. Because the Mario games that it did get were remakes of like the Super Nintendo or even Super Mario 3 ones. I don't know, wasn't finding some quick information on when these games came out, but just kind of know that there was a Super Mario Advance series, right? And again, they were basically remakes of older Mario games, but it was still kind of cool though, because again, playing them on the go was a big novel, was a big thing at the time, right? Because it's not the way it is nowadays, right? And so it was cool that at least people had that option to play these classic Mario games on the go. But we did get Sonic Advance 2, so a sequel to Sonic Advance. And then we got the Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Again, I don't know much about these games. I just know that they were huge. And, I believe we read earlier that these were the top selling games of the year. So, yeah, that was a big deal. And then the one game, though, that I did play and get into this year was Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. And so it was a 2D Metroidvania game. So this is where Metroidvania started on the Castlevania side, started really taking off, right? Because we had Symphony of the Night, which was obviously a big hit, and then we had Circle of Moon, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I believe at this point. Now we're getting Aria of Sorrow, and so, and actually, did we get Harmony of Dissonance the previous year? I forgot. But anyways, so yeah, more of the same like Castlevania games. And this one seems to be a big fan favorite. And I did get pretty far into this one, but it's you're in Dracula's castle, only now it's set in the future in Japan. So it's kind of a weird setting, but it works pretty good though. And it has a cool system where when you defeat certain enemies, you take on their abilities, and so that made for a lot of fun as far as the gameplay element goes. And because for a lot of people prefer this game over Symphony of the Night. I haven't beaten it, but I got it far enough in it to know that it is an excellent game. I really enjoyed this game, and especially that you were playing something like this on a handheld, right? I thought was really cool back then. It was one of the few Game Boy Advance games that I actually really got into. I never beat it, but I got pretty far into it, enough to know that while it is an excellent game, for me, it's not Symphony of the Night, though. But it's still really excellent, though, and definitely a fan favorite, and I can see why a lot of people do prefer this one over Symphony of the Night. Just an overall good game, cool graphics, cool music for the Game Boy Advance, and again, the play mechanic of, being able to use the enemy's abilities was a lot of fun. But let's go over to PlayStation games that came out on this system here. And let's see. So some of these might have been re-released on a different system later on, but they started off at least PlayStation 2 exclusives at this time. So there was a really horrible Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness game, and they were trying to change up the formula to Tomb Raider, but ultimately, and it was delayed for a while. But what came out was pretty bad. And I bought the game at the time almost because I knew it was going to be bad. I think I was just more curious to see just how bad it was. And yeah, I mean, part of it plays a little bit like Resident Evil as far as like the controls go. But it's not, it's just the story's a little weird. I didn't get a whole lot of enjoyment of this one. And, the only thing I remember about the game that was kind of memorable was there's this one part where you go into this club and you're sort of doing some platforming on the railings on top, and there's some pretty cool techno music, but that's about the extent of what I recall of this game that was, kind of cool for, I guess for what it's worth. But yeah, not a very good game though. But I believe you can play this game on one of the Tomb Raider remasters that have come out fairly recently. So if you wanted to check it out for any reason. But two games, though, that came out that are sort of hidden gems on this system here, at least for me they are. I don't hear much about these games anymore, and because, I didn't really hear much about them back then. But one of them, it's a platforming game that's kind of like in the vein of sort of like Jak and Daxter a bit, but it's Kaya. I'm going to say Kaya, Dark Lineage. And so this game gives me very much vibes of like movies like The Dark Crystal, where you're a girl that you get transported to this fantasy world, And so you have like, she has like blue hair, and she has like a almost like a boomerang for a hair clip, if I remember right. And you could do like fighting in like a combat system, right, where you punch and kick, I believe. But you get transported to this fantasy world where there's like these cute kind of like animal looking creatures and all that are, super friendly. But then there's like these wolves that are terrorizing the place. And so you're trying to, save the world, I guess, in this fantasy world that you're in. And I remember I thought this game was really fun and it looked really good. It seemed to use a similar graphical engine to like what was used in Ratchet and Clank and the in Jack and Dexter also. And I mean, it's not the best game, but it's certainly fun. And I would recommend, if you're into 3D platformers, check this game out. So it's Kaya, so Kya, and then Dark Lineage on the PlayStation 2. I don't know who developed it, but I want to say, I think I remember seeing Atari's name on the cover, so maybe they helped publish it. I'm not quite sure, I thought the game was pretty excellent though, and definitely one of the hidden gems on the PlayStation 2 for sure. But another game that's a hidden gem for me, it's this game called Chaos Legion. And this game was developed by Capcom, and I believe developed by some of the people that did Devil May Cry. And it's kind of a weird game. It's like a hack and slash game. It has like this system where you can have like these like monsters help you. I mean, it kind of plays like those Dynasty Warrior games where you just have like a lot of enemies on screen. But the graphics were pretty impressive on it. It runs at a really smooth 60 frames per second. And, I got honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't recall a whole bunch of this game. I just remember liking it back then. And the music I remember I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, it didn't get a whole lot of attention though, from what I recall. But I thought it was pretty cool though for what it was. And so actually, another game that I kind of feel like checking out at some point soon. But yeah, I just remember I really liked it back then, but again, it just kind of went under the radar for a lot of people. But I would check those two games out, right? If you have any interest in checking out, like, hidden gem sort of games. We did get a sequel, though, to Devil May Cry, and so Devil May Cry 2. And, the game is not horrible for me, but it was definitely not what people wanted with this game. So, Devil May Cry, the first one was truly excellent, right? And this one here, you're still controlling Dante. It's still more or less like a 3D action hack and slash game with some with some shooting also. The main thing I think with this game, why people didn't quite like it, is that the overall fun setting and tone of the first one, it's more somber and real, or not real, but like just more. I don't know. It has like a more grounded sort of like somber, I guess, feel to it. I don't know. I just remember everything just felt like sad. Like, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Dante is he doesn't really talk as much anymore, so he doesn't have his usual quips that he's doing. And then the other character you can control in this, I think her name is Lucia. She doesn't have a whole lot of personality to her either. And then the gameplay, I mean, it's kind of the same. It's just that the enemies seemed a lot more toned down. There's not a whole lot of challenge to them. The enemy designs and the level designs and all aren't quite as inspired, even though you do get some new moves, like you can do a little bit of wall climbing or wall running. And but it's not horrible though. I remember I went through the game and I was like, well, that's not bad. I just, because people were really dogpiling on this game, and but I was like, I enjoyed it. I had some fun with it. So it's definitely for me the weaker of the Devil May Cry series in the Devil May Cry series, but it's not bad though. I didn't hate it, right? And well, I'll just leave it at that, I guess. I guess it was a bit of a disappointment just because the first one was really incredible. But but at the same time, I didn't think it was bad. But another sequel we got to was Jack and Daxter. So Jack 2. And so this one changed up the formula quite a bit, as now this was Grand Theft Auto really changed a lot. It really changed a lot in terms of like how games are designed and such. And so now in this one here, it went to an open world game play style. Still a platformer, but now you're able to steal like cars. Well, I guess they're like hover cars in this one, and it has gunplay now in it. But it's pretty well done though, and it still has a lot of that Naughty Dog polish to the game. Definitely a fun game, and even though it felt different than the first one, but it's still at heart a 3D platformer, just with more action now. And now Jack can talk now, and he has a bit of an attitude and an edge to him now. We're kind of going through a phase now where things were wanting, they needed to be edgy now. And but it's still fun though, and it's still a funny game, and the graphics are really excellent in it. Definitely some of the best on the PlayStation 2. As again, the incredible animation and all, it's it looks better now than the characters look more fuller and all and colorful than in the first one. So for that there, it's pretty good. Yeah, just it's a great game overall. I did enjoy it. I just, for me, Jack and Daxter just worked best as a 3D platformer, like in the first one, and that's why out of that series, this one is my favorite one. Oh, I'm sorry, the first one is my favorite one, but I did get an enjoyment of this one. This one here, though, is very difficult. Though it is challenging, and this one is also actually one of the games that's one of my achievements in that I beat the game, right, even though it was very difficult, and because again, I'm okay at video games, but I'm not like someone that can beat like all these challenging games. And so this one though I did beat, and I remember I was kind of proud of that there at the time, but it took me a bit to beat it, but I did, and it was overall I really enjoyed the game. I thought it was a lot of fun. But yeah, Jack 2, pretty cool game. But we also got a sequel to another one, and that's Ratchet and Clank Going Commando. Now this one kind of more the same as the first one, but just better overall. It just felt more polished. The controls are better. The graphics are a bit better too. Also, the stages, a lot of more. They're a bit more varied, and just overall, it's just a better game in my opinion. And actually, this is my favorite Ratchet and Clank game. They changed up the voice actor from the first one, where now it's James Arnold Taylor that does it, and he does good as Ratchet. And this one still kept a little bit of the edgy humor to it. Later entries, they would get a little bit more sanitized, I guess. This one is still a bit edgy, and by that I mean it's still like within PG-13, right, rating. It's or even it's not like anything too crude, but it was to the point where it didn't feel like kiddie, right? But James Arnold Taylor, he does fine as this and all. I kind of prefer the voice actor of the first one, but he still does a pretty good job in this one, and he's become the voice of Ratchet now, so he definitely became iconic in this role. But overall, though, my favorite Ratchet and Clank game is just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the weapons to it, the overall levels, and the silly little story to it, and all that's still a lot of fun, and just an excellent game. Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, one of my favorite games of this year, and I'm glad they didn't mess with the formula too much, because I thought they got it down really well with the first one. It just expands more on it, and yeah, definitely this is where this series started really becoming a big heavy hitter for the PlayStation brand. It's just a lot of fun. But another game that came out this year, and it was a really controversial game, probably one of the most out there, is Manhunt. So this game was done by Rockstar, and it's the purpose of the game is you're like in this, you're an inmate, and somehow you go on this show of some sort, or basically you're being recorded, and you're being recorded to kill people, and the more gruesome your kill is, the more I think points you get, or I forgot how that all works, but very violent game. It's definitely not one for the kids, but it's at heart it's like a stealth game, right? And because that's the main purpose of it, right? Is that you're sneaking up behind your enemy and all, and taking them out, and just a variety of weapons you can use, everything from a plastic bag to a glass shard and things like that to kill your enemy. The kills can get kind of gruesome. So yeah, the game was definitely pushing to be edgy and all, but for what it is, it's a cool concept though, actually, and it plays well enough from what I recall, and but yeah, just not for the faint of heart though, because again, the game was banned in some countries, right? So it's they were definitely trying to push the envelope with this game, but as a video game itself, it's pretty good. It's not bad. But another game too also that came out on the PlayStation 2, and that was Castlevania Lament of Innocence. And this game is a game that I really, really wanted to like. There's a lot that it has going for it that I think is really excellent. It's just that there's something though also about it that just drags it down. And so Castlevania Lament of Innocence, it's this game had my interest because it was uh it was being done by the same team. So Koji Iga, I think is his name, the dude basically behind the Castlevania Symphony of the Night game, but now he's going 3D. The music was done by the same composer of Symphony of the Night. So I was really excited about it, right? And they were showing the video footage of it and all. And it looked, the graphics looked pretty good. And I was like, okay, this looks great, you know. And there's also the same character designer of like Symphony of the Night. So all of that seemed like a great combination. And they were doing it in 3D. So, ah, man, you know, this game suffers from unfortunately a lot of things that even games to this day can suffer that brings it down for me, and pretty much kind of the same complaint that I had with Metroid Prime 4 Beyond that came out recently. So the great things about this game, the graphics are pretty excellent. Runs at 60 frames per second, the character models look really great, the setting and all looks really great. The music is outstanding, on the level of like Symphony of the Night. Just absolutely outstanding. That song that plays in that kind of section, in that laboratory stage, it's one of the, you can select which stage to go to at first, but it's kind of like one of the stages that you first can go into. That seems the more obvious one to go into. At least that's the one that I always end up going to first. But it's called like this Lab of Hidden Souls or something like that. Whatever that stage is, but the song that plays on it is such a banger of a song. And just the overall soundtrack is truly outstanding. The controls feel really great. Leon Belmont is the character you play, and he controls really well. The controls are really precise. The whip attack feels very snappy and powerful, and seems like it has a lot of impact, and it controls well. Like he's very responsive and all. The jumping on it and all, a little stiff, but it works. Um, and let's see, the story and the setting and the concept of the game. So basically, this is like the first Castlevania game in the timeline. So you kind of find out like why you're fighting Dracula, right? The Belmonts are fighting Dracula throughout the years. So I thought that was pretty cool too. All of that, as you start playing the game, you're like, okay, look, this looks great, plays great, music is great, let's go. What it suffers from is kind of the same thing with Metroid Prime 4, is that the levels just feel very linear and generic. And now I don't think like they were trying necessarily to do like a Metroidvania with this game, but some things that suffer in 3D gaming is that if you're an action game, right? So you're not trying to be a Metroidvania, you're just an action game. If the levels tend to drag out a little long, it can make things really repetitive and uninspired and a bit of a chore to get through. And that's kind of what I felt with this one, because I remember I'm playing the game and I'm having a fun time with it at first, but then as I'm going through that first level, for example, right, the Lab of Hidden Souls or whatever it's called, after a while, I'm like, okay, this is kind of dragging on for a bit, and there's not a whole lot of variety in the stages as far as like the level design and all, and so it all looks kind of bland, like, and so then that just kind of carries out to the next several levels, and so that's one of the main issues that I had with this game here, is that it's just that, right? It just kind of feels like ultimately a generic action game when everything else feels so right though. And that for me, I think right there, at least for me personally, highlights just how important good level design is, because it's what keeps you engaged. It's what keeps you hooked on a game. But unfortunately this one just didn't quite have it. And so it's not bad. It's I actually have some fun with this game. It's just, I feel like it could have been so much better though. But for me personally, oh, I'd have to think on this, because I did like another Castlevania game that came out some years later, but that's in a different generation. But I think this one might be my favorite 3D Castlevania game. But I say that also saying that I'm not I mean, there's been some ones that I haven't minded, but for me, Castlevania has worked best when it's in 2D. But yeah, but I appreciated though that they were trying to do something with this game, and so for that, I did have some fun with it. I remember I beat it back then and all, and I was like, I liked it. I really wanted to love it, but I ended up still liking it though. So, um, But but we also got another game on the PlayStation 2 that was highly unique in that what it is, and then also just the overall setting and the gameplay and all that. But it's so we got a sequel for the first time, a direct sequel to a Final Fantasy game, and that was for Final Fantasy X2 or 10-2 or however you want to call it. So I was kind of excited about this in a sense because I just really enjoyed Final Fantasy X, but this one, it's different. It's they definitely go in a different direction on this one, but it's I think it's kind of, if you were going to do a sequel to it, I mean, I guess I could think of worse ways to do it because the first one, I mean, it had a bit of a, it was a bit emotional. It was a bit sad. It was a bit epic, and also definitely had a very grandiose feeling about it. And the way it ends, it definitely ends on a, on a somewhat sad but also satisfying way. So if you're going to do a sequel to this, I mean, they went in a direction where it was just more like a fun spirited adventure, where you control Yuna and Riku, who you also control in the first one, but then also a new character called Pain, and she's more of a gothic sort of girl, more emotional and grounded. And so they called themselves the YRP, or Riku and Pain, and it kind of gives off the vibes of like a Charlie's Angel sort of tone about it, where it's fun. It's, the girls are, that you play in it, they're very silly, and they go on this kind of, I guess you could say, like a treasure hunting adventure. So the hook of the game is that, so from the very start, right, is that well, I guess I'm trying to think, like, should I spoil the events of a game that's like over 20 years old? Basically, Yuna gets a heads up that someone is still alive. I'll say that. And so that's what leads her on this adventure. And so you're basically revisiting a lot of the areas from part 10, only now they look a little bit different. A few years have passed, so the politics of the game and all are different. So there's new characters to meet. And so that's all fun and all. And the gameplay is changed up now too, where it's still a turn-based in a way, but it goes back a little bit more to using the ATB gauge from the previous Final Fantasy games. And then in this one too, you can change your job outfit too. So kind of like what we were seeing in Final Fantasy V, where you can become a black mage, a white mage, a warrior, a samurai. And so that's a lot of fun to experiment with, as each one has different abilities that you can get. And so, makes for some pretty fun play mechanics. Overall, I actually had some fun with this game. I thought it was quirky enough and all that it caught my attention. And the gameplay, actually, it plays pretty well. But there are some parts where it's a bit cringe, but that's kind of the point of it too, also, right? And the overall mystery to the game and all, it's a game though that unfortunately you have to almost 100% to get like the best ending, which is kind of hard to do because I think you have to do multiple playthroughs of it. So you really have to be invested in this game and the story and all that it's trying to tell. I think the main hook of it for me personally was just that I'm getting to see more of this world that I really loved in the first one. And even though it's through a different pair of lenses, it still was worth taking this adventure on for that reason there. But it's very more silly, more a much lighter tone. The music also reflects that as well too, the music is pretty good in it. It's just different, right? It's kind of very kind of poppy, and just the game starts out with this like a J-pop song, well, translated in English also, but so you can kind of get the idea of what kind of tone this game is. But not bad though. I mean, it's not bad. It's just, it exists, I guess. So I would say that if you really enjoyed the first one, but Final Fantasy X, and if you really get into the story of that one, I would say play this one, just because again, you get to explore the overall world more. So, but another sequel we got too, and this one was on the PlayStation 2 exclusively, was Silent Hill 3. And so this game here, so Silent Hill 3 is actually a sequel to Silent Hill 1. And so it continues on the story of that one there. and it's kind of more of the same of like parts 1, 2, and what they were doing as far as the gameplay wise goes. So not a whole lot changed there. So this one really, you play for like the story and the atmosphere and that the Silent Hill games bring, and so it's really well done. I mean, it's a great game. It just doesn't really change a whole lot of the formula. Uh, but for a lot of people, though, they really enjoyed this one, and for some people, it tends to be their favorite. For me, it's I don't know. I like it roughly about the same as part 1, give or take. And I mean, they're excellent games. But part 2 was just something else, though, right? Part 2 did its own thing, and I just absolutely love what that one was doing. But this is definitely a worthy game in the series, and really outstanding graphics in it too. Some of the best of this generation, actually, I would say. The character models and all I mean, they looked pretty real for the time. And so I was really impressed with the graphics on it. The music is still really great from the same composer. Just an overall great game if you're really into the survival horror genre. And I guess you could say, was considered like the last great original Silent Hill game. Because after this, I mean, we had another decent entry, but then after that, it just kind of goes downhill for a while. But the first 3 games, though, are really good, and this is the last of that trilogy there. But again, 1 and 2, or I'm sorry, parts 1 and 3 are sequels to each other. So, and then part 2 is sort of its own thing. So, just so you know. But another really great game, though, that came out this year on the PlayStation 2 was a JRPG called Xenosaga. And so this game, was created by Monolith, who they eventually would, be the ones doing the Xenoblade Chronicles, that are really popular now. And also the series that they did after the incredible Xenogears. So it's more or less a lot of the same team members, from what I understand. And this one here, it's very cinematic heavy and very story in what's the word? God, how am I trying to say this? It's very heavy on its storytelling. A lot of the game is cinematics, and that's one thing about this game that if you're going to get into it, just know that you're going into really long cutscenes. I mean, there's a good stretch there where all you're doing is just watching cutscenes. But I mean, the writers of this game, they're just and because I think all of them are involved in, again, this Xenogears and this Xenosaga series. They're really, the stories and the imagination that they have is really incredible. So it's kind of like Xenogears in a way where, it's kind of a sci-fi RPG. There's stretches there where you control mechs, there's androids, and also it's more of a sci-fi RPG. But the battle system is pretty cool. I remember I had a lot of fun with it. It's turn-based, and just some of the options that you have to fight your enemies I thought was pretty fun. And so, yeah, overall, just a really excellent JRPG. Again, if you don't mind a heavy-handed story to it, and really cool characters to it, and incredible music done by the same guy that did Xenogears and Chrono Trigger. So really excellent soundtrack on it too. And yeah, overall a cool game. One of my favorite endings, actually, of all time in a video game. I thought that the ending to this game was truly incredible. And so, yeah, I mean, I as I'm thinking about it now, it's one of my more favorite games that came out this year. Again, it's just, you have to really go into it expecting that you're almost going to watch a movie, like a really long movie too. So just, heads up on that. But you can skip the cutscenes though. But again, if you skip the cutscenes, you're missing a big point of what the game is trying to do. So, but yeah, just if you're into that kind of stuff, definitely a cool game to check out, and it's certainly worth your time. And so this was a pretty ambitious project because they announced that around this time that the goal was to do 6 parts or 6 games, I guess, and this is the first one. Eventually, that got scaled down quite a bit, but overall, there was a really ambitious story that they were trying to tell, and they started off in a really good fashion here with this first one here, Xenosaga. As far as this game wasn't re-released anywhere else, so as of right now, if you don't, outside of just getting a PlayStation 2 and a copy of the game, emulation would be the way to go on this one here. But let's jump over to the GameCube. So the GameCube had a pretty decent year too also. And
One game that I had on there, and now this wasn't an exclusive because it did come out on the Dreamcast, I believe in Japan only, but one game that I first played on the GameCube was Ikaruga. And so, but this is very much like one of those bullet hell games, but it has a really interesting concept, and it's developed by Treasure. So I don't know if I talked about this game in a previous year, but there was a Silhouette Mirage, a game that came out originally on the Saturn and then eventually on the PlayStation, where it's like a 2D action platformer. But that game there is depending on what side you're facing, your shots will affect a certain way. So, like if you're facing one direction, you get these red shots that'll affect the blue enemies and vice versa, right? Something like that from what I recall of that. This game sort of takes that concept there where you can switch between white shots and black shots, and the white shots will hurt the black ships more and vice versa. But if you're shooting white shots, then that means that you can get hit by the black shots. But if you get hit by white shots or bullets, then you absorb their energy. If I'm explaining that right, but it's a really fun concept, and it's just that it's very challenging. I mean, it's a bullet hell game, and if you don't know what bullet hell games are, it's basically a shooter where they just like to fill the screen with a bunch of like enemy projectiles, and I mean they're incredibly challenging, and so but that's kind of the point of the game. So if you like a 2D shooter like that and all, then hey, absolutely go for it, right? Yeah, but if you're not too much into a challenging game, this one might put you off pretty quickly because it is incredibly hard. But the concept of it though is very unique, and so I think this is why this one got some recognition back in the day, because it is a very unique shooter. Just go into it knowing that you're in for a challenge though. But we got a Mario Kart game this year also for the Nintendo's main home console, and this is Mario Kart Double Dash. And I gotta say, out of like all the Mario Karts that I've played, and I'm not like really into them. I do like playing them; they're fun. And like more recently now, I do like playing the newer ones. I get to play with my daughters, and they're pretty fun. But if I'm just thinking about like just the gameplay to it and my personal favorite, I think I would probably go with this one. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really seem to add a whole lot, but I just like the concept of like having two characters on your card. I think that was fun, and so this is probably the Mario Kart game that I got into the most. And at least back then and all, and I just remember having a lot of fun with it, and the graphics are really colorful, looks really nice, and plays really well, and just a fun overall Mario Kart game. And I wish they would re-release this game too. I mean, hopefully they'll release it on the Nintendo Switch Online thing, but so far they haven't announced anything. But yeah, it's a really fun game, a really fun kart racing game. But then we also had F-Zero GX. And so this game was developed by Sega and Nintendo. So it was kind of weird seeing both of their names on the screen, right, as they're showing like at the beginning, right, like who developed it and all. And F-Zero GX it's a fan favorite. It's really great. It's a lot of fun, but very challenging too. The game is hella fast, and so sometimes it's kind of hard to keep your craft, or control your hovercraft there. But it's still a lot of fun, and it's still a really well-made racer, and it has a cool story mode to it. So there's a lot of content here to keep you busy, as far as racing games go. Just again, know that you're in for a challenge though, but it is a lot of fun though. But this game you can play on the Nintendo Switch Online, so they did re-release it there. So that's pretty cool, as this game was really highly sought after again to be re-released, and so it's at the very least, right? Nintendo gave us that version there, and yeah, just it's F-Zero. It's cool. It's hella fast, fun, and worth playing. If anything, just the graphics were really incredible on it too. Also, so if anything, it'd be worth checking out on that service if you're already subscribed to it. Just if anything, for that reason there. But another game that's also got re-released on that service recently but that came out this year, was Wario World. So Wario, I'm not too familiar with a lot of the Wario games. Like I know he's had everything from like platformers to like these weird sort of puzzle games on the Nintendo handheld devices. I can't say I'm too familiar with his games, but this one I really enjoyed though. And I got this game because back then it was announced that that Treasure was making this game. So having been a big fan of Treasure games, I was like, all right, well, let's check this game out. And
It's kind of like a platformer beat 'em up game. It's very weird, but it's a lot of fun though, and the stages were a lot of fun to go through. And Wario, he's just kind of his weird, creepy self, but he's a lot of fun to control, where you can like pile drive your enemies and punch them, and uh, um, he's super weird, where he does like this weird sound as he's collecting coins. But it's a lot of fun though. It's definitely a very quirky, weird platformer that feels Nintendo for its characters, but as you start playing it, you're like, oh yeah, this definitely feels like a treasure game, and that's a good thing. It's a really fun game, and one of my more favorite on the GameCube. I thought this game was a lot of fun, and so again, if you already subscribed to the Nintendo Switch Online service, it's on there now for the GameCube. If you have the Switch too, so worth checking out. But another game too that came out this year, and this was an exclusive to the GameCube, and it was part of a deal that Capcom did with Nintendo, where they were going to release some games on the GameCube exclusively. I think it was like 4 or 5 games that they announced for that. One of them was this game called Piano 3, and this game it didn't get the best reception, and critical reception. I mean, not like a signal reception, but um, but it's kind of a weird 3D third person shooter, but the controls are very weird on it, and I think that's what threw people off. Was where the way you control the game, I mean, you can move forward and back, but the character feels very stiff at first, and after a while, though, I ended up appreciating the game, because you almost have to look at it not so much like a third person shooter, but more like a game almost in the lines of, like, it's gonna be a weird comparison, but like something like Tempest. And the way the control is set up, I think they were trying to make a game within that style right there. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but ultimately, I actually kind of like this game. It's not that bad. I had some fun with it. I think people really got thrown off because of the controls are kind of stiff and weird, where it doesn't control like your typical third person shooter, at least what we're used to nowadays, where you have to push a button for like the character to strafe, or sidestep and all. And then also it's set in the futuristic time frame, and a lot of times you're going through these some kind of a base in space, right? And so meaning that the setting and all looks very generic, just not there's a lot of like silver and white basically on the walls, and also they don't have a whole lot of detail to them, but again, the gameplay still kept me hooked on it, and it's not a terribly long game also. And if anything, it has a cool little twist to the story. So, if, like I said, right, there's something to look forward to, right, if you do want to push through this one. But I had fun with it. I thought it was an original game, and it has some pretty cool techno-ish music to it too. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a cool little, for me, a hidden gem on the GameCube. I did enjoy it. But again, first impression on it, especially if you're used to more 3D shooters nowadays, you're probably going to get put off by this. But it's still pretty cool, though. I enjoyed it. It has a cool, main character to it, and it's not bad. Like I said, if you're interested in giving a kind of a different style of a 3D shooter a chance, check this one out. But part of another game that was exclusive on the GameCube, at least at first, was part of that whole deal that Capcom did, was Beautiful Joe. Now this game is excellent. This game is it's basically like a 2D action beat 'em up game, where you control this character Joe that he turns into like a superhero. And what's cool about it is that he's such a movie fanatic, and that the gameplay takes inspiration from that, where your superpowers are where you can slow down time, so kind of like in the Matrix, but you can also speed it up really quick too, also, and to give you almost like these fast superpowers, almost like the Flash. And so the way you can combine those power, and there's another one too, I forgot, but it's just a lot of fun, very original, cool characters. Definitely one of the better Capcom original IPs from this generation, that unfortunately just didn't get a whole lot of eyes on it. And part of that might have had to do because it launched originally on the GameCube. And again, the GameCube just didn't have the biggest install base. But it is such a good game. If you've never heard of this game or played it, it is challenging though also. But if you like a good challenge and all,
check this game out. It is highly original, very cool. One of my favorite of this year. And I just remember I got really giddy when I played this game at first because it felt so fun. It's just the whole concept of the game is just really fun. Great graphics that's like cell shaded and runs at a smooth 60 frames per second. Absolutely amazing. It eventually got ported over to the PlayStation 2, and I believe that was next year. Because again, this deal, it just kind of fell apart because, again, the GameCube just wasn't doing that great. Like PNO3 still stayed exclusive to the GameCube, but then some of the other games that came out in this deal, as we'll talk about a little bit later too, in the later years, they ended up going to some of the other systems. So, but at least at the time, though, and all, it was a cool GameCube exclusive and a lot of fun. And I wish it just had more fame to it, but doesn't mean that it's not a great game, though. But we also had The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. And so this game, again, had come out in Japan already late in 2002, but it came out around the springtime of 2003 here in the States. And yeah, a really incredible game. It's, for all the hate that I already talked about last episode, right, that it was getting, it ended up being really great. And just the really fun dungeon layouts and sailing the world. It kind of gave me the vibes of like Waterworld, the movie, which the movie's not that bad. Waterworld is not a horrible movie, but kind of more of a kiddie version of that. So I don't know. I just thought the concept of that was cool. Sailing the high seas and a lot of fun puzzles in the dungeons that you explore in this. Great boss battles. Your power ups are really cool. It plays a lot like Ocarina of Time in a sense, right? Where you're going through a dungeon, you get a main item to be able to advance in that dungeon, and then you can use that item in some other parts in the overall open world. And a lot of fun, great little story to it. For what it is, the graphics are really colorful and really well done and hold up incredibly well too. This game still looks pretty stunning and just a very charming adventure. And it ends up being one of my favorite Zelda games of all time. It's just so much fun. And one thing about it, you could take this as a negative maybe also, but for me personally, I think of it as a positive, maybe just because I'm getting older, but it's not a very challenging game. So it just feels like the right kind of challenge where, excuse me, you can get through this game, with not too much trouble, but it's still a lot of fun though to get through. And you'll have a lot of fun with this game if you appreciate the Zelda games at all. And so if you haven't played it, for any reason, it is available also on the Nintendo Switch Online service that you can play it on there. And yeah, just a truly excellent game. One of the best games on the GameCube. And for all the hate that it got at first, I think eventually when people started playing it, they're like, oh no, this game is good. It almost seemed like the hate went away almost overnight. And even nowadays, the game is looked very fondly upon now as people look back on it. And it is truly an incredible adventure and just so much fun. Almost has like a bit of a Disney vibe to it where it had sort of that fun, sort of spirited adventure sense. And then, also the kiddie graphics on it also kind of lend to that. But yeah, and even though it looks almost like a play school sort of setting to it, it does have some mature themes and, a bit of dark moments too in it also. So, again, don't think that it's just a completely kiddie version of Zelda. It does have some maturity to it and just an incredible game overall. Really well structured, just world that you explore, and it's just an absolute blast. So yeah, great game. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. But let's go over to what the Xbox was doing. And so it had some exclusives on there. Now, a lot of these games, when I say exclusives, I mean at the time or on a console, because some of these games did, come out also on the PC. But so some of the games that I jotted down here that were exclusive to the Xbox on console was one of them was Brute Force. And I enjoyed this game. And this is a game I don't hear a whole lot about either. But in this game, it's like a 3D shooter. And you control 4 characters, I believe, in it. And they all have their different abilities. And I want to say, if I recall, you can switch between them on the fly. And so you got your kind of like your grunt soldier. You get this kind of lizard-looking dude that he has certain abilities. And then there's, I believe, 2 girls you can pick from. One of them, I think, is like a sniper. And I forgot what the other one is. But I thought the concept of the game was pretty fun. Some of the control schemes in it, even though it is a third-person shooter, it kind of feels a little bit like Halo as well, too. And I want to say I think this is a game that you can play on the Xbox Live, and as they were trying to get that service going, and I never obviously played it that way. As again, I just never played games online much, but the single player though I thought was pretty fun. It had a pretty cool concept to it overall, and I enjoyed my time with this game. I wish they would re-release it, but it never was though. But and then with Xbox emulation being kind of spotty, it's this is a game that's just kind of a little bit lost to time though and all. And it's not like a truly groundbreaking, amazing game, but I thought it was a cool little Xbox exclusive though that I had some fun with back in the day. But another game that came out on the Xbox only was Otogi Myth of Demons. So this game here, for all you Dark Souls fans, if you haven't heard of this game, so this is developed by From Software and published by Sega. And the game has a very atmospheric, dark, somber sort of tone to it, where you play like this kind of like a ghost samurai, and you're out hunting down these demons, I guess. I mean, it definitely think of like a Dark Souls only set in a ancient mythical Japanese setting and lore sort of vibe about it. And it's like a 3D action game, and you can you can kind of dash across the screen and double jump. And the cool thing about this game though is that the destructive environments I thought was pretty impressive in this. It's kind of a rush to hack away at an enemy and then do like a power slash on it, and you see your enemy just crash it against one of the like rock walls, and it just then you see all the destruction around and all that. I thought that was actually really cool, as the graphics are pretty impressive on this. It runs at 30 frames per second, but it has a lot of detail in it, and all in the destructive environments make it, pretty impressive. But it's kind of you go through each area to complete certain objectives, like defeat a certain amount of enemies or defeat a certain enemy. And it's incredibly hard, though. It is a very difficult game. So, kind of like a From Software game, but it plays different than the Dark Souls game. So just kind of keep that in mind. But definitely has a sort of vibe about it, right? And all that those Dark Souls games has, just in a different setting. So yeah, I mean, like I said, it's if you're a fan of From Software and are interested in seeing what some of their earlier work was, that I would recommend checking this game out. As far as I know, I think it's still available on the Xbox storefront. As I know, I have them downloaded on my Xbox Series X, and so this and its sequel too. So if I don't talk about its sequel in later years, just its sequel was, from what I played of it, it's more of the same kind of, but still pretty cool also. So definitely some hidden gems there on the Xbox, I would say. Let's see. But another game too also that was pretty cool during the stretch, but Deus Ex Invisible War. I was noticing in some of the previous episodes that I had done, whenever I've mentioned the series, I was calling it, what was I calling it? Deus Ex. I think at one point I called it Douche Ex. So I had to look it up, like, how the hell do you pronounce this? So it's Deus Ex Invisible War. And so I really actually enjoyed this one. So again, it came out on the PC, but on the Xbox too this year. And this one seems to be known as a sort of the black sheep in this series, but I enjoyed it because, to me, I hadn't really played immersive sims that much at this time. I thought the whole concept, and I'm a big fan of like cyberpunk settings, and also that really hooked me on it. And I just enjoyed that you have multiple ways to complete an objective, and the overall setting of it kind of reminded me a bit of like the game Flashback that I really liked back on the Genesis, but done in a 3D first person shooter style. And I got a little ways into this one, and I remember the story was engaging enough, and just the overall concept of the game, it truly was impressive to me. And so I'd be curious to give this game another shot again. I did purchase this game for pretty cheap on Steam, I don't know, maybe about a year ago after I got my Steam Deck. And one of the games that I started realizing, like, oh, damn, there's a lot of good deals on Steam. And so it's in there, my backlog on that system there. And so one game that I do want to go through at one point, because one thing on the Xbox, though, is that the game did run a little choppy, right? There's a lot going on, right, in the game. And so the frame rate kind of struggles a bit, where I'm sure the Steam one probably runs a bit better. But it was sort of cyberpunk back then, at least as close as what we could get to it. And it was because I always wanted a game like that, a very immersive first person game set in a cyberpunk universe. And so this game gave me some of that there. And I mean, it took cyberpunk to really fully satisfy me on that there. But that, that'll come later. That'll be a whole story, when I start getting to that year when that game came out. But for what it was, though, at the time, Deus Ex, Invisible War, I thought was pretty incredible, though, at the time. But to end this all off, I've been rambling on here now for a bit, and is what I feel was my favorite game of the year, and truly an incredible game that it opened up my eyes to a different kind of RPG, because I've been mainly used to like JRPGs, like Final Fantasies and things of that nature. I hadn't really gotten into like more Western style RPGs, or like RPGs that seemed to be catered to like a PC, to the PC crowd, and that was Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic. I absolutely love this game. And when it was coming out, I remember it was getting a lot of great reviews, and people were talking really highly about it. That yes, it plays kind of like a PC style RPG, and by that I mean that I don't understand a lot of these terms, so forgive my ignorance on this. But like the way your accuracy is when you're trying to attack enemy depends on the roll or whatever. So I think that goes back to like the Dungeons and Dragons, where you roll a dice, and depending on what number you get can determine like the probability of you hitting your enemy, something to that effect. I don't know if you want to correct me on that. But I'm a nerd. I'm just not a Dungeons and Dragons kind of nerd. I'm a different kind of nerd, and so I'm curious to see if other nerds can educate me on that. But so it feels a little different, right, when I was playing the game. But because it's Star Wars, and again, I had a big fascination with Star Wars at the time still, and I kept hearing that the story was really excellent on it and all. I gave the game a shot, and yeah, absolutely was floored by this game. I really enjoyed it overall. Really, for me personally, my favorite Star Wars story that I've seen, right, that I've been able to like interact with, whether if it's in a movie or a game and all, just an incredible story. And what I really love about it is that because it's not set in the Skywalker timeline. It's doing its own thing, going back like 4,000 years in the past, right, from when the Skywalker saga takes place. And so for me, that gave it a lot of freedom as far as what they can do with the story. And they came out with something just truly incredible, and just a great RPG with a great story. But was different from the kind of RPGs I'd already been playing at, up to this point, where you're still getting experience points and leveling up, but now you're kind of doing side missions and things of that nature, which it just felt overall different from the structure of a JRPG. But I really enjoyed it though. And what was cool about this game too was, it's a Star Wars game, right? So meaning that a lot of your choices that you're making in this will determine if you're going to the light side or the dark side. So that was kind of cool how they did that. And a lot of it plays out like almost like those choose your own adventure novels, right? Where you're selecting an option on the dialogue, and then depending on what you choose can change a little bit of how the game plays out. I mean, more or less you're playing the same story, but certain little scenarios, right, will play out a little different. So I felt that sense of freedom was really refreshing for me at the time. And the cool thing about it too was when I played it, I was working in this warehouse, and so two buddies of mine that were there. So one guy already talked about that. He was the one that got me into Halo. And then another friend, we all had the Xbox, and so we decided to purchase this game. And so then we would play it on our own, and then the next day at work, we would come back because we were trying to be more or less at the same spot as we were going through the game. But because we were making our own choices in the game, we would talk about like, hey, what did you select on this scenario, right? Oh, I picked this, and this is how that played out. And oh, well, I picked this, and this is how that played out. And so it was just kind of a cool time, right? And all getting to interact with some friends at work on our different experiences playing this game. At the time, I never really had anybody that I could talk video games with, so that was pretty refreshing for me then that, I had those friends that we would talk about this game quite a bit as we all got into it a lot, and was just a fun time and a very awesome game. I really enjoyed this game, and, I'm sure it's kind of probably one of the twists that happened in the game that's probably one of the more obvious ones that we all know about now, outside of like maybe the one in Final Fantasy VII. But I still won't spoil it here in case you don't know anything about it. But just yeah, when it happens, it just left me absolutely blown away by what happens, how it plays into the story, and everything that has happened before, and how it go, how the game continues on afterwards. I was just truly stunned by it, and it came out of left field. I did not see it coming, and I'm so glad that I got to play this game before the internet really took off. So that way, I wasn't spoiled on it beforehand, like the way now things are. And so yeah, it just was just amazing for that there, and it's just one of the coolest moments ever in a video game. It was truly excuse me, truly amazing. But yeah, so overall, a pretty good year, right? A lot of great stuff that were coming out as we're still in the thick of it on this generation. And like I said, right, we had some cool exclusive, but a lot of cool multi-platform games that came out as well too, that I felt really defined this year, and a lot of this generation as well too, that just made, for me personally, all these three systems worth owning, along with the Dreamcast too, right? And yeah, just an incredible time. One of the, for me, probably my favorite generation of all time, if I'm looking at the overall scope of the games that were released. And yeah, I mean, from what I mentioned before, right, on the setup that I had, just made it for a truly fun year for video gaming. And as a lot of these games that I mentioned here, I owned a lot of them. And so, yeah, I was just trying to absorb all this goodness here during that time frame there, and definitely helped me keep myself afloat during this stretch of my life here where I was, a bit of a young adult. And so all the stressors that comes with, right, and all as you're trying to find yourself and, make your place in this world, and always had these video games to come back home to when, just needed to unwind a bit. And so, yeah, it was a fun experience playing these here. And so let me know, though, if there's any games that you played during this year that you had a lot of fun memories of, or any memories just of these games in particular that I mentioned here. And that'll do it for this year here as we go into 2004 for next week's episode. Hopefully, I'll be able to get this recorded by next Sunday. And 2004, there's 1998, which is great, and 2001, which is amazing. Probably the 2 years that are known to be one of the best years in gaming. But 2004 for me is right close to being up there as well too. This is another incredible year for gaming, and had a particular game that would cause a whole lot of controversy from a particular series we've already been talking about. So we'll get more into that for next week's episode, and hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next. Have a good one.